A scientist sits in his lab working on an experiment when the door suddenly opens and a tall, hard-nosed man enters. The scientist hastily stands up and salutes the general who oversees the scientist's entire program. The general dispenses with formalities and tells the scientist that he's being assigned to something new. Before the scientist can even ask what it is he'll be working on, the general gives a small wave of his hand and 2 soldiers appear in the doorway. They are each holding the side of a large metal box, and from the strained expression on their faces, it's clear that the box is very heavy. They set the box down on the scientist's heavy wooden desk with a loud thud before stepping away from it. The scientist looks over the bulky lead case that's been brought to him, no idea of what could be waiting inside. "Be very careful with this," the general says, before handing a folder full of papers to the scientist. The scientist, unsure of how to respond, moves his hand to salute the general, but he has already turned on his heel and started to exit the small lab, followed closely behind by the 2 soldiers. The scientist looks over the folder that was given to him. There's nothing on the cover, so he opens it and starts looking inside, skimming over the long, dry paragraphs that say nothing at all and seem to be included in every government report for some reason. Ah, there it is. Contents. 1 6.2 kilogram sphere of plutonium-239. Plutonium-239? He's been doing research in this Army-run research lab for some time and knows exactly what this is. A sphere of plutonium-239 can only be one thing: a core for a new atomic bomb. 2 were already dropped on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and their never-before-seen power caused death and destruction on a truly horrendous level. But they had also helped to put an end to the Second World War, potentially saving the lives of thousands or even millions more. And no matter what moral questions he had about it, this was his job. And as an expert in physics and chemistry, his research would potentially help put a stop to fighting in the future. After all, no one would dare go to war when they knew their opponent had weapons that could cause devastation on this scale, right? The scientist pores over the typewritten records, reading each and every handwritten note in the margins. As he reads through them, he sees warnings about the experiments from the report's unnamed author. There are references to how slim the safety margins are when handling the material for testing. Since the core is intended to be used in a new nuclear weapon, it needs to be right on the edge of supercriticality, the point where fissile material undergoes a chain reaction that is key to nuclear detonations. The report then describes an experiment where the core was to be surrounded with bricks made of tungsten carbide that would act as a mirror of sorts, bouncing neutrons back at the core, which would knock loose other neutrons. The experiment was to be stopped before the core went supercritical, but when the scientist turns the page to view the results, he finds nothing. There's no more pages in the folder. The scientist had heard rumors about these types of experiments. Tickling the dragon's tail, they called it. But where were the rest of the reports? Was this really the last experiment that was done? He sees at the top of the page that this last experiment was performed over a year ago. Just then, the scientist notices someone walking by in the hall. It's the general. He runs out into the hallway, waving the report at him. "General! General!" The general stops and turns around, clearly annoyed at being intercepted while on the way from one important meeting to another. "General, what happened in the last experiment?" The general somehow looks even more annoyed by the question. "Don't worry about it," he barks back at the scientist. "His time on the project was finished. It's yours now." And with that, the general leaves the scientist standing in the hall with his incomplete file. Days pass, and the scientist receives additional orders on what types of experiments he should be carrying out. All of them are designed to guarantee that the core of plutonium will be suitable for use in a new weapon. For the latest test, he's performing an experiment not dissimilar to the last one described in the report, but instead of using tungsten carbide bricks to reflect neutrons back at the core and achieve criticality, a beryllium dome had been created, which is to be lowered down over the sphere of plutonium. As he lowers the dome, he knows that if it were to close completely, it would cause the core to go supercritical in an instant. In order to prevent this, he uses a screwdriver to prop up one side of the dome, allowing just enough neutrons to escape so that the core can maintain its stability. As he lowers the dome just a small amount more, he starts to hear something. It's a faint noise at first, but gradually grows more and more audible. Radioactivity produces no sound, so the scientist is confused, especially since it sounds like the noise is coming from inside the dome. But surely that's impossible. There were no processes happening within that should be creating any sort of noise. The scientist bends down and lifts up the edge of the dome ever so slightly more, just enough so that he can peek inside. As he does, the sound grows louder. He looks right into the core of plutonium-239 and sees something. There is movement on the sphere. He knows this is impossible, but he can see them with his own eyes, images dancing on the surface of the plutonium sphere. They were faces, unnatural faces, contorted and twisted in pain. He can see now that these are the source of the sound he was hearing, because the faces are screaming. The scientist jumps back, and the screwdriver slips away from the edge of the beryllium dome, allowing it to fall and completely cover the plutonium. Out in the hallway, a security guard covers his eyes, momentarily blinded by the flash of intense blue light. When his vision returns, he runs into the laboratory it came from. The exposed sphere of plutonium sits on the desk, and the security guard looks up to see that the dome that once covered it has been embedded into the ceiling. He hears a moan come from the other side of the desk and rushes around to help the scientist, but when he looks down at the ground, he doesn't see a man. Lying there on the floor is a charred and bloody body, the small amount of skin and flesh that is left sloughing off his body. The scientist reaches toward him with a skeletal hand, emitting one final groan before collapsing. Nuclear weapons have claimed many lives, not just those who suffered directly from their overwhelming destructive energy or the subsequent residual radiation known as fallout, but many of those who researched and developed the science and technology behind them also became victims of their incredible, almost otherworldly power. Today's anomaly is an example of exactly that, combining the astonishing power of nuclear weapons with the world of the supernatural. This is SCP-095-FR, the Demon Core. SCP-095-FR is a 6.2 kilogram sphere, 89 millimeters in diameter, that is composed entirely of plutonium-239. Despite at one point seeming to be a normal sphere of the plutonium isotope, SCP-095-FR now seems to be in a permanent, self-sustaining state of criticality. This results in a near-constant emission of alpha radiation, which is powerful enough to damage any electrical circuits within a 20-meter radius. The sphere's danger grows the closer you get to it, too. Within a 10-meter radius, any living tissue will become extremely irradiated, leading to radiation sickness, while denser materials like metal or bone will themselves become extremely radioactive. The plutonium sphere is somehow able to maintain a consistent mass, despite its state, which should lead to a decrease in overall mass. It's theorized that it may be undergoing some sort of regenerative process, though it's been impossible to determine just how this might be occurring. SCP-095-FR was recovered from the seafloor near Bikini Atoll, which was the site of a series of nuclear weapon tests by the United States government known as Operation Crossroad. These and later tests, including the Castle Bravo test, resulted in the island chain becoming extremely irradiated, and many of the island's residents soon showed signs of acute radiation syndrome, leading to much of the indigenous population being forced to relocate. Following the Operation Crossroad test, an anomalously high source of radiation was detected in the sea. Though records are incomplete, it appears that the core of plutonium that had been responsible for the deaths of multiple scientists had somehow ended up on the ocean floor. Whether it got there due to being part of a failed bomb detonation, or if it somehow appeared there by other, more anomalous means, is unknown. But regardless of how it got there, the attempted recovery of the object led to the deaths of several American service members from radiation-related illnesses, which the SCP Foundation soon learned of. After assisting in the retrieval of the sphere, the plutonium was relinquished to the Foundation's custody for containment. The SCP-095-FR sphere was placed under the purview of the French branch of the SCP Foundation, owing to their having a readily available site for containment, where the sphere was stored in a lead-lined radiation-blocking safe and classified as Euclid. Only D-Class were permitted to transport and handle the plutonium, since its effects amounted to a death sentence for anyone who got too close. They were also responsible for transferring the sphere to a new safe every 6 months, due to the damage it was causing them from constant bombardment of radiation. All of these containment procedures would have to be changed, though, following the events of January 7, 2015. On that day, 69 years after it first took the lives of 2 scientists at the Los Alamos laboratory, and despite it being a scientific impossibility, the Demon Core suddenly went supercritical all on its own. The resulting explosion was estimated to be roughly 33 kilotons, or about twice the power of the atomic bombs that had been detonated over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nearly the entire site housing SCP-095-FR was destroyed, along with 14 other safe and Euclid-class anomalies, and in the end, the death count totaled 285, with casualties coming from either the blast itself, the collapse of structures on the site, or from the resulting radiation poisoning. Incredibly, the sphere itself survived the explosion, showing no signs that it had detonated with the force of a nuclear weapon when it was recovered from the site's wreckage. Foundation researchers studying the Demon Core determined that it was likely to explode again in roughly 50 years, and that the only discernible difference measured in the core before it suddenly went supercritical and destroyed the Foundation site was a sudden spike in radiation. Foundation scientists have no idea how the demon core survived, or how it detonated without warning. Some theorize that it may exist in some kind of time loop, which would potentially explain its explosion regeneration cycle, and that it is possible the core has actually detonated several times before entering into Foundation custody. But perhaps the bigger question when it comes to the demon core and why it has become such a dangerous object is why. Is there something contained within this seemingly cursed sphere of plutonium? Is it a part of those who have been impacted by the quest to harness the power of atomic energy somehow contained within, now desperate to get out and unleash their anger on the world? Research continues, but due to the extreme danger that comes from working with the anomaly, it's likely these questions will remain unanswered for some time. Following the destruction of the Foundation site, SCP-095-FR was reclassified to Keter and moved to an underground bunker designed to withstand an explosion equivalent to a standard atomic bomb, which it is hoped will be enough to contain the blast that is almost inevitably going to happen again. It's a sobering thought, even for those of us who work with and around anomalies on a daily basis, to be reminded of the incredible destructive power of nuclear weapons. Some of the most feared and deadly anomalies contained by the SCP Foundation pale in comparison to the carnage that we've inflicted on ourselves, and it's important to remember that sometimes the true demons are found inside of us. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-767, Crime Scene Photographs, for another anomalous object with a strange and deadly secret. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single anomaly, as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives. The High Priest, adorned in the finest purple ceremonial robes, stands before the great, bull-headed statue in the darkened belly of the castle. The year is 850 CE. Masked worshippers whisper chants of holy reverence on all sides. He is in his element. Everything they do in service of the great god Moloch. All around them, banners bearing the sigil of the Brazen Heart hang. It's a celebration. Just a few hours earlier, their forces had invaded an enemy church in the hills. They'd slaughtered most of the congregation in a sudden whirlwind of bloody violence, staining their swords in the great Moloch's name. But as the High Priest had ordered, some of these blaspheming Christian churchgoers were taken prisoner and brought back to the castle for questioning. Here, the High Priest would deal with them himself. A sadistic, tooth-bearing grin crosses his face at the very thought of it. Soon after the ceremony, the High Priest descends into the dungeon, which he'd taken with a certain flourish to calling the Game Room. Here he keeps his private collection of torture tools from around the world, each of which he takes great pleasure in using against the worms who refuse to bend the knee to his bloodthirsty god. In the Game Room, the air is suffused with the stink of blood and sweat. The prisoners who still have tongues start to scream when the High Priest enters, knowing that everything is about to get so much worse for them. He's cultivated a certain reputation as a man willing to do anything to ensure the superiority of his infamous cult, the Brazen Heart. If ever you fell into his terrible clutches, escape was out of the question. The very best you could possibly hope for was a mercifully quick death. In the corner of the room, one unfortunate captive was twisted and shattered against a breaking wheel, but still torturously alive. In the corner across from him, another prisoner bleeds from the inside of a grimacing Iron Maiden that the High Priest had overseen the construction of personally. But that was only the very beginning of the High Priest's collection of terrible instruments. Prisoners teeter in agony on Judas cradles and Spanish donkeys. Skin is stretched and bones are cracked on racks. Some are pierced as they sit on the monstrous iron chair, while others simmer away in great vats of oil. Some scream as they hang from their wrists on the 10th round of strappado. Lead sprinklers, Spanish ticklers, thumb screws, crocodile shears, choke pears, melee boots, heretics' forks, bastinado sticks, scold's bridles, scavengers' daughters. The High Priest has all of them, and he's adept at using them. But they all pale in comparison to his favorite piece, a prized possession, gifted from the bosom of Moloch himself, the Liar's Cradle. Such a perfectly ingenious tool for physical pain and mental terror, it's positioned at the very center of the game room, just so every other prisoner and every other device can see him using it and know that it's their eventual fate. a mighty stone furnace with huge metal grates on either side. As the high priest approaches, he can see a terrified prisoner already writhing within the machine. When the prisoner sees him, the fear only gets worse. The high priest would have no mercy for him. He'd spent 10 hours on the breaking wheel before this, and that felt like a pleasant sleep in a comfy king-sized bed compared to what he was about to endure. 2 of the high priest's sadistic acolytes jab at him through the grates with red-hot pokers. The high priest grins and asks the prisoner what village he hails from. When the villager surrenders the information, the high priest gives a sagely nod. He asks how old the prisoner is, and the prisoner says 27. Again, the high priest nods. He asks the prisoner whether he would like to leave and be with his family again, and of course, the prisoner replies yes. He has no idea that they're all already dead. The high priest smiles and says, "Just one more question then, and you'll be free to go. What is my true name?" The prisoner pauses for a moment, which earns them another jab with the poker. He tells the high priest that he doesn't know. He's jabbed again and again and again. He begins to cry and starts apologizing. He doesn't know the high priest's true name. How could he possibly tell him, no matter how much he's tormented? The high priest says, "Well, just give me your best guess. Who knows? Perhaps you'll be lucky." The game room falls silent, all eyes on the prisoner in the liar's cradle. His lip trembles, knowing from the dark legends what will happen when he answers. He breathes a ragged sigh, accepts his fate, and guesses incorrectly. Suddenly, the prisoner screams as he catches fire. The high priest watches with unrestrained glee as the prisoner burns. He does so for around a minute, the fire burning far more intensely than it possibly should have. By the time it's done, the pile of ashes that was once the prisoner falls through the grate in the bottom of the liar's cradle. The high priest turns to the rest of the room and asks, "Who's next?" Of all the many adjectives you could use to describe SCP-2128, also known as the Liar's Cradle, humane certainly isn't high on the list. This antique stone furnace was discovered deep in the dungeons of an undisclosed castle, believed to be a former refuge of a fringe occultic group known as the Brazen Heart, a cult of worshippers of the Canaanite deity Moloch, an entity mentioned several times in the Hebrew Bible. Among the deity's most notable traits is its bull-like appearance and the fact it requests burned human sacrifices. This feels extremely relevant, given the fact that the Liar's Cradle is all about giving its victims a fiery end. While the thaumaturgic methods used by members of the Brazen Hand to create the Liar's Cradle is unknown, what is clear are the cradle's capabilities and functions. When a human being is placed within the cradle and asked questions, a single lie will lead to them being anomalously incinerated. And the device's purview for a lie is frighteningly wide. A victim will be incinerated if something they say is factually untrue, regardless of the victim's personal knowledge. In other words, ignorance as an excuse will not save you. While the Brazen Heart was wiped out hundreds of years ago by soldiers of the Spanish Inquisition, the SCP Foundation has been able to glean some background information about the Liar's Cradle from a surviving document, a sheepskin scroll known as the Ignis Manuscript. This revealed that the cradle was invented around the 9th century CE, before being walled up in 1021 CE, and during its heyday, it was used as a torture device by Brazen Hand members against their enemies. While most torture is actually incredibly ineffective at getting information, studies have shown that under states of extreme duress, victims will simply say what they believe their captors want to hear in order to make the suffering stop. The Liar's Cradle is an excellent method of wringing information out of captives. Well, aside from the fact that one lie means the captive is immediately reduced to ashes. You see, SCP-2128 works on a true or false binary operating system that seems to imply an innate awareness of all knowledge. If you have enough captives to burn and know the right deductive or inductive questions to ask, it's possible to know almost anything in enough time. It's believed the Brazen Heart used the Liar's Cradle both for practical purposes and their own twisted amusement. Victims would be placed in the device and have their feet prodded with hot pokers while they were asked a series of increasingly probing questions about their life, being forced to divulge extremely dark and personal secrets or meet their doom on the pyre. It was a depraved combination of physical and mental torture. If even hearing about all this makes you feel a little queasy, nobody could blame you for that. The SCP Foundation, however, looked at the Liar's Cradle and saw incredible potential. As mentioned earlier, The Liar's Cradle bases its judgment on raw, factual knowledge, not the knowledge of its particular victims. So anyone with enough people to burn can conceivably work their way towards discovering any binary answer. And given that the SCP Foundation has an almost unlimited number of D-Class personnel at their disposal, it didn't take long for them to realize all the knowledge that was up for grabs. They just need to make a few sacrifices along the way, hoping to save more people in the long run. Moloch himself would probably be proud. It was this somewhat morally dubious chain of thought that led to the creation of Experimental Protocol 37 Sparafusel, the Foundation's plan to utilize the Liar's Cradle to discover more information that would assist in their mission to contain anomalies and protect the human race. The protocol is outlined in a 5-step procedure that is as follows. 1. One D-Class employee, referred to as the Messenger, will be laid inside SCP-2128. 2. The Messenger will repeat statements as instructed from the prepared list. 3. After each statement, if the Messenger remains unharmed, the statement is to be marked as true. 4. As soon as the Messenger is incinerated, a new Messenger is to be provided. The statement that triggered the incineration is to be marked as false. 5. A new Messenger will be assigned. Repeat as needed. While the total extent of these tests remains off the record, the official files on SCP-2128 have some fascinating supplementals about some of the results of Experimental Protocol 37 Sparafusel. The first set of tests was designated EP-37 Sparafusel-22, Keter Checkup, and was conducted on January 10, 2014. The messenger in this case was D6238. The first statement this D-Class was fed was, "The human race is in danger of extinction right now." Seeing as D6238 didn't immediately go up in flames, this was found to be true. The second statement was, "The danger comes from an item in Foundation custody." Much to the relief of the D-Class, this was also found to be true, and he lived to make another statement. This statement was, "The dangerous item in question is located at a site in North America." This was, sadly, the D-Class's last words, as this statement proved to be false, and he was immediately burned to death for his troubles. The next messenger brought in was a woman now known as D6239, after she committed an armed robbery that killed several innocents and landed her on death row. Her statement was, "The dangerous item in question is located at a site in Europe." This caused her to be immediately incinerated. The SCP Foundation then continued to narrow their focus on this matter over the next 13 D-Classes. With the information they gained, they were able to narrow down that SCP-752, a subspecies of humans who are eager to displace and replace non-anomalous humanity, would be the cause of a containment breach that could potentially end the human race's dominance if they weren't stopped. D6253 was given the statement, "SCP-752 will breach containment within the next month." The answer was true. Next came SCP-752 will breach containment within the next week. Also, this proved to be true. D6253 would finally meet their maker with the false statement, "SCP-752 will breach containment tomorrow." But this opened the door for the final correct answer delivered to us by D6254, that SCP-752 will breach containment today. Armed with this vital information in the nick of time, the Foundation dispatched MTF Nu 7, also known as Hammer Down, their largest and most well-armed mobile task force, to the site in question. This quick thinking allowed them to quell the threat at the exact right time and save the world from an SK-class dominance shift scenario that would have left humanity in the dust. Using the Liar's Cradle, the SCP Foundation had just saved the world as we know it, and all it had taken was a handful of D-Class lives. So naturally, the tests with the Liar's Cradle didn't stop there. Next came EP-37 Sparafusel-23, Knowledge Measure. As the name suggests, this test hoped to ascertain the extent of the knowledge the Liar's Cradle possessed, seeing as it could continue to come in handy for Foundation purposes. The first messenger was D7784, who was fed the statement, "SCP-2128 knows everything." This turned out to be false and led to the D-Class's immediate incineration. However, the lead researcher on the case decided to take a different approach. Perhaps, he thought, the Liar's Cradle didn't accept the numerical designation that the Foundation had placed on it. The next messenger, D7785, led with the statement, "The Liar's Cradle knows everything," which proved true, because that allowed him to live long enough to be incinerated by his next statement, "The Liar's Cradle will tell us everything." After his incineration, D7786 stepped up to the metaphorical plate, first saying, "The Liar's Cradle will tell me everything I need to know." The Cradle judged this to be true. It did not, however, take kindly to "The Liar's Cradle will tell the Foundation everything they need to know." It declared this statement false by immediately incinerating the D-Class. After this incineration, the EP-37 Sparafusel project was out of its daily allotted D-Classes and decided to call it a night. Their next test was the mysterious and controversial EP-37 Sparafusel-24 Sunday School song, which utilized D-7891 as its messenger. She was fed the statement, "Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world." The results of this particular test have been permanently expunged from SCP Foundation records. Next came EP-37 Sparafusel-25 Pinocchio Paradox, which was an experiment intended to see how the Liar's Cradle would react to logical paradoxes. Spoilers, it doesn't involve as much incineration as you might expect. First came D-8232, who provided the statement, "Telling the Liar's Cradle a paradox is dangerous to Foundation personnel." This was proven to be false, and ironically, he was burned alive immediately. Next came D-8233 with the statement, "The Liar's Cradle is going to kill me right now." The Liar's Cradle bent its own rules by declaring this false, but only incinerating the D-Class enough to permanently disfigure him rather than killing him. D-8234 was shoved into the Cradle after that, making the statement, "The Liar's Cradle is going to burn me right now." This was proven through empirical observation to be false. 10 seconds passed without incineration. However, when D-8234 exited the Cradle, he complained about sustaining a small cut on one of the rocks that made the Cradle while climbing out of it. This caused D-8234 to rapidly succumb to a previously undiscovered form of gangrene and pass away in minutes. Finally, D-8235 entered and said, "The Liar's Cradle is going to inflict physical harm upon me right now." This was proven false, and D-8235 climbed out of the Liar's Cradle unharmed. At this point, however, he began to cry and scream out the word, "Goodbye," before dying via altogether more unpleasant means that I don't wish to discuss in great detail here. The last experiment we have on record here is EP-37 Sparafusel-26, Subjective Opinion, which intended to see if the Liar's Cradle liked to turn logical gray areas into logical charred black areas. Messenger 1, D-9224, made the relatively uncontroversial statement, "Golden retrievers are cute." The Cradle seemed to disagree, immediately incinerating him. The next messenger, D-9225, delivered the counterpoint, "Golden retrievers are ugly." And just like that, he was up in smoke. However, when messenger 3, D-9226, delivered the wildcard statement, "Golden retrievers are tasty," everyone in attendance was surprised to find the Liar's Cradle completely agreed with this. When D-9226 delivered the completely understandable reaction, "Wait, what? That's freaking nasty," he was immediately reduced to ashes by the Cradle's flames. With this line of questioning concluded in the strangest manner possible, the new messenger, D-9227, was brought in. Before becoming a member of D-Class personnel, his name was Stephen Kemp, a cannibalistic serial killer who'd murdered and eaten 14 women before being captured, tried, and put on death row for his crimes. He delivered the statement, "I'm a good person." Surprisingly, the Cradle felt this was true and let him live. However, when Stephen decided to get cocky and chime in with, "Joke's on you, jackasses, apparently I'm Mother Teresa," he was immediately incinerated due to the fact that he was not, in fact, Mother Teresa. His ashes were soon accompanied by that of D-9228, who made the statement, "The Liar's Cradle is sometimes incorrect," before being burned to death. Next came D-9229, who allowed for the longest streak of unbroken statements in the history of tests performed on the Liar's Cradle. He said, "The Liar's Cradle speaks only infallible empirical truth." True. He said, "The Liar's Cradle is hungry." True. He said, "The Liar's Cradle's hunger can never be satiated, no matter how full it becomes." True. He said, "The Liar's Cradle would like to incinerate me right now." True. He said, "The Liar's Cradle is growing impatient." True. He said, "The Liar's Cradle sees delicious, warm meat on its plate and would very much like to be fed." True. He said, "The Liar's Cradle is angry that it is continually denied its meat." True. He said, "People meat is delicious." True. He said, "I am delicious." True. He said, "My skin is warm." True. He said, "The crackling of fire upon boiling drips of fat and rapidly cauterizing flesh gives the Liar's Cradle pleasure." True. After such an incredible streak that also allowed for a frightening insight into the apparent personality of the Liar's Cradle, D9229 was withdrawn alive. He was replaced by D9230, who said, "The Earth is round," and was immediately incinerated. It's widely believed that this outcome came from the Liar's Cradle maliciously interpreting Earth as dirt, rather than the planet Earth, just so it could incinerate the subject. Just because the Liar's Cradle is largely objective doesn't mean it isn't incredibly petty, it would seem. Because of the static nature of SCP-2128, it has been given the rare, safe object class. Containment Site 403 has been built around the castle that currently holds SCP-2128, and a healthy supply of D-Class personnel is regularly siphoned off for EP-37 Sparafusel. The sadistic sorcerers of the Brazen Heart may be long gone, but in a strange and disturbing twist of fate, the researchers of the SCP Foundation are keeping the spirit of their work alive even today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-987, The Gruesome Gallery, for another terrifying anomalous object that reveals some terrifying truths. All he could see were glimpses, flashes of movement, but he could clearly make out that there was a girl. He could see the man walk up behind her and slip a bag over her head. There was a struggle, a body being dragged through the dark, and then the sound of a shovel scraping against the hard dirt. The body is thrown into the shallow hole, and as the dirt begins to rain down on her face, her eye opens up. The boy's eyes open too, and he sits up with a panicked jolt. Shaky and covered in sweat, he looks around his dark room and realizes that it was only a dream. The entire morning as the boy gets ready, rides the bus, and sits through school, all he can think about is the dream and the girl. A group of teenage girls are out for a ride in one of their father's sports car convertible. They're having too much fun and driving much too fast down the dark country roads. It doesn't take much. It never does. Just the shadow of an animal bolting across the road, but it's enough to make the driver jerk the wheel, causing the car to lose control. All of the girls scream, but none more than the one who is tossed from the sliding, spinning car. The girls stand around their dead friend and make a solemn pact. No one here will ever know that she was with them. But what will they do with her? One of them points towards the woods, and everyone turns to look at the dilapidated shed. As the girls, now dirty from their long night of digging and then filling a hole, emerge from the shed into the dim morning light, none of them are aware that beneath the dirt, the girl is still breathing. The boy gasps for air and struggles in the dark. He throws the blankets off of him before realizing that he is safe in his own bed. Another breakfast, another ride to school, another day of classes where the boy can think of nothing but the girl from his dreams. Who is she? He's never seen her in his life, he's sure of it. But then why does she keep appearing in his dreams? The boy is snapped out of his deep train of thought by the teacher slapping his desk, and he apologizes before focusing on his studies once again. The look on the woman's face is a mix of sadness and annoyance. She doesn't know how much longer she can go on like this. It never stops. How can someone cough so much? The woman sits in her chair and tries to push away the same thought that comes to her over and over, that it would be better for both of them if it would just end. The girl coughs loudly in her bed. The disease has ravaged her lungs, and it takes all of her willpower not to scratch at the burning, itching sores on her face and chest. She looks towards the door with dazed eyes and sees her mother enter the room. She's carrying a tray with soup, just like she always does at this time, even though she has no appetite at all. As her mother gets closer, she can see that the tray is empty, and it isn't a tray in her hands. It's a pillow. The girl can barely muster a scream as the woman places the pillow over her daughter's face. As the mother walks out of the old shed in the backyard and towards the house, she stops for a moment. Can she hear the sound of coughing coming from the shed? That morning at breakfast, the boy's father tells him in no uncertain terms that he doesn't want to hear any more about the girl. It's just a dream and he needs to put it out of his mind. What he needs to be focusing on is school. The note from his teacher said that he isn't paying attention in class, and if that keeps up, he's going to have much bigger problems. The boy promises no more about the girl. As the boy stares out the bus window, it isn't his fault that thoughts about his dream rush into his head, because as the bus drives along the country roads, he catches a glimpse of something down a long, tree-covered driveway. It's the house from his dream. The shed door opens with a creak, allowing a sliver of light from the full moon to fall inside. The boy enters the shed as quietly as he can and goes inside. He soon emerges with his bike and a shovel strapped to his back, before riding away from his own backyard into the night. The boy stops his bike at the bottom of the driveway leading up to the old abandoned house. He rides up the drive and doesn't even consider stopping at the house. His destination is somewhere else. The boy lets his bike fall to the ground in the backyard and stares at it. It's the shed he's seen so many times before, despite never seeing it in person. It's dark and quiet, the shed silhouetted against the large, bright moon. He approaches the only door on the small shed and reaches for the handle. It opens with a loud, rusty squeak. The boy takes out a flashlight and turns it on, illuminating the shed's interior. Inside is nothing except for a wooden bench sitting on the dirt floor. But wait, there is something else. A spot on the ground appears different, blackened, almost as if it were burned. This is the spot, though. This is the place the boy keeps seeing in his dreams. He knows she's down there. She needs his help. The boy thrusts his shovel down into the dirt, but it doesn't even scratch the surface. The ground is cold and hard. He strikes down again, and the shovel pierces into the dirt. The shovel suddenly falls to the ground, though, as the boy begins to cough. He drops to his knees as the coughing becomes a fit. He can't stop, and now he can't breathe. It feels like his throat is filling with something. He falls to the ground, still coughing as he feels whatever is filling his throat and lungs moving and vibrating. The final great hacking cough, he unleashes a swarm of creatures from his mouth. He lies in the dirt, struggling but unable to get any air, as the buzz of thousands of locusts drowns out his final noises. It's no surprise that what this young man ran into wasn't a dream at all, but an interaction with an anomaly that has since been classified as SCP-4595, but also has the quite simple and appropriate name of Witch. SCP-4595 is the designation given to a small room located inside of a woodshed that is itself found behind a home near the town of Jasper, Indiana. The house appears to have been abandoned for some time, and there are no reliable records of who the home's most recent or original owners were. The only item inside the woodshed is a simple, rough-hewn wooden bench, though at the time of the anomaly's discovery, 2 other objects were found as well. The first was a small shovel, the type that might be used for gardening. The shovel appears to be ordinary in every way, except for the very tip, which has what looks to be a blood stain on it, though tests have been unable to retrieve any genetic material from the discoloration. The second object was a small human skeleton. The body of the deceased person was removed from the woodshed, and an autopsy revealed that it had belonged to an adolescent male, roughly 11 to 13 years old. While the exact cause of death was unable to be determined, it is extremely likely that it was due to the anomalous effects that SCP-4595 produces, but more on those in a moment. Further examination of the woodshed reveals that the word witch has been scrawled on the door with charcoal, though it is unknown who wrote the message and whether it is meant to serve as a warning or has some other purpose. It is highly likely, though, that the word is referring to the final element of SCP-4595, the body that is buried beneath the woodshed's dirt floor. Ground-penetrating imaging tools were brought in to investigate the shed, and researchers discovered that underneath one portion of the floor that appears to have been scorched at some point, a body is buried roughly 1 meter beneath the surface, which has since been designated as SCP-4595-A. Scans have revealed the body to be a humanoid figure, vaguely feminine in appearance. Its limbs are twisted in a painful and unnatural manner. There are several large wounds present on its face, chest, and neck. But perhaps strangest of all is that despite evidence at the site pointing to the location not having been disturbed for many years, the corpse buried beneath does not seem to show any signs at all of decomposition, still appearing as it most likely did at the time it was interred in the ground. You are most likely asking yourself why the SCP Foundation has relied solely on subterranean imaging in order to assess the state of SCP-4595-A, and why they don't simply dig up the anomalous corpse. The reason why they haven't is due to the anomalous effects present at the site. Testing on SCP-4595 has concluded that anyone who enters the shed and remains there for any substantial amount of time will begin to experience a number of effects. First, they will start to feel paranoid, getting the impression that someone is watching them. This purely mental effect is quickly followed by a physical one, where the individual's skin will start to itch. Those who linger in SCP-4595 long enough will eventually begin to violently scratch at themselves in an attempt to relieve the itchiness. These effects, while very uncomfortable, will eventually subside if they leave the location, and it is very likely that they are meant to serve as a warning of what will happen if one partakes in the most dangerous aspect of SCP-4595. which is disturbing the body buried beneath it. Anyone who attempts to impact SCP-4595-A by attempting to dig it up or otherwise remove it from the location will quickly experience a horrendous anomalous effect. The individual will soon find that they are experiencing a shortness of breath and soon will begin coughing and choking and be unable to breathe at all. This is due to a phenomenon in which any empty space in their chest cavity, lungs, airways, stomach, and intestines will completely fill with Schistocerca gregaria, better known as the desert locust. The insects will continue to appear within the individual's body until they expire, a process that typically takes mere minutes. Any locusts that manage to escape the individual's body, most often through the mouth and nose, will disappear into a vapor that quickly dissipates the moment they cross the threshold of the woodshed's doorway. So far, no method has been determined that can prevent any of SCP-4595's effects, and for the time being, no personnel are allowed to enter the anomalous shed except for testing purposes. But even in those cases, the disturbance of SCP-4595-A is not allowed. Due to the relative ease with which the Foundation can secure the site and is able to prevent anyone from entering, it has been classified as safe, with the additional disruption class of Dark and the risk class of Warning. Just what is SCP-4595? Is the SCP-4595-A body a victim, doomed to an eternity beneath this ramshackle shed? Or is it a monster, sealed away for some unknown purpose, the only warning for us to stay away being a single word on the door? Maybe one day we'll finally know the answer to why SCP-4595 is only known as the Witch. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-3998, The Wicker Witch Lives, for another SCP entry that tells the tale of a witch, though maybe not the story that you'd expect. As night falls, everything sinks into a soft blue darkness under a blanket of twinkling stars. In a nice, cozy home, in a normal, quiet suburb, a sweet little boy is being read a bedtime story by his mother. It's a classic, Little Red Riding Hood, the story of a little girl traveling through the woods to her grandmother's house, only to be set upon by the big bad wolf. A tale as old as time, with an important message for people of all ages. We should fear what lurks in the dark, since what is there is often waiting and watching with hungry eyes. As the boy lays in bed, clutching the top of his blanket, his mother continues telling him the tale. She describes the tiny girl in the red hood, holding a little wicker basket, stumbling through the dark. The wolf, with its big, hungry eyes, weaves through the darkness of the trees, following her every move. The little boy can barely contain his fear when Little Red Riding Hood opens the door to her grandmother's old cottage and creeps inside, where she realizes that something is very wrong. Her grandmother looks different. Those great big eyes, that twitching wet black nose, those huge terrible teeth dripping with saliva. All the better to eat you with, my dear. His mother senses that her son isn't taking this well and notices that he's shuddering underneath the blankets. She closes the book, smiles, and insists that the story has a happy ending. This does nothing to ease the growing specter of fear stretching out over the boy. Could the big bad wolf be waiting outside his window, watching him with those red, ravenous eyes? Would the window really keep such a monster at bay? He doesn't feel so sure. The little boy's mother kisses him on the forehead and tells him that if he needs anything, she and his father are just down the hall. He's been having nightmares lately, but that's all they are. Nightmares, all in his head. Nothing in there could actually hurt him. He's alone now, shivering in bed, trying to focus on the light of his tiny nightlight plugged into his wall, a little glowing friend that will watch over him and keep him safe. His mom and dad got it for him when he told them he was afraid of the dark. But there's still a lot more dark in this room than light. His closet door suddenly creaks open, and he bites his tongue to stifle a scream. It's an old door. It opens by itself sometimes. There's nothing to worry about at all. It's a mantra his parents had drilled into him on prior instances when this door had creaked open. Even in the dark, the little boy can make out something. It looks like one of the many other shadows created by his nightlight, but it's different. Something darker than the dark. And it's moving, sliding out of his closet. A fog shaped like some unknowable creature. There's nothing to worry about at all, he tells himself over and over again. The fog leaves the closet entirely, and it starts getting closer to the boy's bed. As it rises up from the floor, the boy can see something in the fog. He can see eyes. Big, glowing, hungry eyes, like the eyes of a big bad wolf, ready to eat him alive. He opens his mouth to scream, but only a yawn comes out. He wants to get up and run to his parents' room down the hall, but his body feels so heavy, his movements so slow and sluggish, he can't move, and the eyes of the monster made of dark keep getting closer. "There's nothing to worry about, nothing to... Mom, Dad, please help me." All he can do is think about screaming, not actually make any noise, as his eyes shut, and he drifts off into the land of dreams. He opens his eyes to find that he's standing in a dark and endless forest. The trees are tall, extending up into a black and starless sky. But there's something wrong with them. Bodies, hundreds of them, old and desiccated, are speared onto their branches, their faces locked into what looks like permanent, silent screams. A thick, viscous black liquid drips from some of the bodies, pooling into what looks like puddles of tar around his feet. When he looks down, he sees that he's wearing strange, old-fashioned clothes. His shirt is bright red. There's a low, bassy growling behind him, like thunder, like a rumbling earthquake, primal and deadly. He can feel it vibrating in his bones. Moving slowly, as though he was underwater, he turns and sees the beast looming behind him. A giant wolf-like monster made from shadows, teeth cut from jagged black glass, eyes glowing and hungry. He's never been so terrified in his life as he is right now, standing in front of this monster that seemed to be the literal embodiment of fear, the embodiment of deep animal terror, the beast that haunts the dreams of every frightened boy and girl. It growls again, and he begins to run. But it's not real running. It's dream running, as if the gravity were too strong, slow and cumbersome through the thick, confining air. He keeps pushing through the resistance all around him, but the wolf made of shadows moves quickly. It weaves through the trees, its mouth dripping wet with hunger, its eyes emitting a dim glow like the nightlight back in his bedroom. He runs for what feels like hours, tears streaking down his cheeks, until finally he can see salvation in the distance, a house standing in the middle of a clearing in the woods. But not just any house, it's his house. In the logic of the dream, he knew that his mom and dad would be inside. They'd help him. They'd keep him safe from the monster. He just needs to get there. He just needs to survive. He finally reaches the front door and tries to open it, but it's locked. So he hammers his fists against the wood, screaming and crying for his parents. He looks over his shoulder and sees the shadow wolf charging towards him through the darkness of the woods, its huge, dark feet hitting the ground with the speed and force of gunshots, getting closer and closer and closer. With one final desperate pound of his fist, the door to his home finally swings open and he falls through. The door closes behind him as he hits the floor, and the sound of the wolf is gone. He gets up and looks out of a nearby window to see that there's no forest outside, just his neighborhood again, underneath a starless sky. He looks down and sees he's not wearing those strange, old-fashioned clothes anymore, just the same pajamas he'd worn to bed. Are things back to normal now? Had it all been a dream? He tries a nearby light switch, but nothing happens. Still dark. That dread comes creeping back in. If it had been a dream, what did that make this? He starts making his way up the stairs, calling out to his mom and dad, but there's no response. He climbs further, walking down the hallway towards their bedroom door. The hallway seems so much longer than he remembered it, but for some reason, he never stops to question the discrepancy. He just wants his mother and father. Not long after, the little boy reaches the door to his parents' bedroom and opens it. The room is so dark, but he can make out their forms lying in the bed. He approaches, calling for them again, but there's no response. Instead, he just hears an awful wheezing sound, like air being let out of a balloon. When his eyes adjust to the dark, he sees that something is terribly wrong with both of his parents. They're now old and thin, with sickly yellowing skin hanging from their bones. Their eyes, milky with cataracts, are set deep in their jaundiced faces. The mere sight of them forces a gasp out of him. Their heads slowly turn with audible crunches. Their chests rise and fall in those same slow, mechanical exhalations. They both look like life hurts for them now. The little boy begins to cry. They beckon him closer, wanting to comfort him, but he's too terrified of their appearance to take a single step towards them. His mother opens her thin-lipped mouth, revealing rotten teeth, and says,
Sweetheart, I'm so sorry, but Mommy and Daddy can't take care of you anymore. We can't even be here for much longer. We need to go. I'm sorry that we don't have more time.
The little boy can see his parents aging by the second, getting thinner and frailer and sicker right in front of him. His pity and fear outweighs his revulsion, and he steps forward to embrace them. They're so terribly cold. He grips his mother's hand, but he can feel the bones turning to dust inside her paper-thin skin.
It's going to be okay, darling,
she whispers, her voice hoarse and brittle in her final moments.
Your grandmother will take care of you from now on.
That's when he hears it behind him again. That terrible, low rumble, the primal growl. As his parents both turn to dust in their bed, he turns and sees the monster, the same wolf made of shadows, filling up the doorway. It seems even bigger in here, bulging through the doorway, thick black saliva dripping from its obsidian fangs. He tries to repeat that same mantra to himself. There's nothing to worry about at all. But suddenly he's short of breath as an immense shadowy claw closes around his torso. It lifts him up off the ground until he can feel the beast's breath on his face, but it isn't hot like it should be. It's freezing, like a gust of wind in the deep snow. With a deep, commanding voice, the monster says,
"Only lucky children get to wake up from a dream like this, and not everyone can be lucky."
All he can do is scream when the wolf's jaws close around his head. Not a soul can hear him. He's swallowed up into the darkness of the monster, and soon he's nothing at all. In the waking world, the sun rises, morning birds caw and tweet, alarms go off. But when the little boy's mother checks his bed that morning, it's empty. He's vanished without a trace. In the panic of the days, weeks, and months that follow, in the extensive search that turns up nothing, and that unlucky little boy was never seen again, it never even occurs to his parents to ask, "Did we leave that closet door open?" Did you suffer from bad dreams as a child? Night terrors? There's no shame in it. It's not an uncommon affliction after all. Perhaps there's a hazy, half-formed memory in your mind of waking up screaming when your parents turned on the lights, comforting you, telling you that it was just a bad dream and nothing more. But what if it wasn't? What if it was SCP-080? This vaporous entity, nicknamed the Dark Form by some who have worked with it, is every child's worst nightmare. And if you give it a chance, every adult's worst nightmare too. That's because this black, smoke-like figure has the anomalous ability to induce extreme drowsiness in anyone who spends more than half an hour near it in the dark. Shortly after falling asleep, if nobody comes in and rescues the victim by turning on the lights, they will experience the most horrible nightmares you can possibly imagine. So horrible, in fact, that those who have suffered these nightmares and survive often experience irreparable, lifelong psychological trauma. And in the grand scheme of things, those are still the lucky ones. If you're unlucky, like the little boy who vanished from his bed, you'll disappear forever, consumed by SCP-080. The creature itself is difficult to properly see due to its lack of consistent form, and due to the fact that it only appears in the darkness, but those who have witnessed it can only seem to remember one key detail: glowing eyes in the smoke. Because of its preference for dark places, SCP-080 often takes refuge in closets and under the bed, where it can vanish out of sight. Bright light automatically causes the creature to disappear and manifest elsewhere, and therefore, should you start feeling unusually drowsy in the dark, turning on the lights is the best thing to do. But these must be bright lights. The soft glow of a standard children's nightlight is not powerful enough to ward off the creature. The SCP Foundation conducted a series of experiments, hoping to see whether SCP-080 had any kind of real physical body, and if it was possible for human beings to safely interact with it. In the first of these experiments, a 19-year-old male D-Class was sent into the chamber to interact with SCP-080. Unsurprisingly, he immediately became extremely distressed upon seeing the figure with glowing eyes forming in the dark. He described it as being human-shaped, but far too big to be a human. He begged to be released from the chamber, but by this point, he'd already started yawning, and the drowsiness was setting in. The researchers running the experiment wanted to see what would happen next, though, and eventually, his pleas to be released fell silent as he drifted off to sleep. When guards were finally sent in to check on him, they found Nothing at all. Nothing remained of the D-Class. He'd been consumed by SCP-080, just like so many others. Next, a 30-year-old female D-Class was sent into SCP-080's chamber. When she was able to make out the vaporous form with the glowing eyes, she was instructed to try and physically touch it. She followed the orders. However, upon touching the entity directly, she immediately fell unconscious. She was quickly retrieved from the room, since the Foundation wanted to make sure they could interview her rather than letting SCP-080 consume her. According to a physical exam given to her by the Foundation medics, she'd experienced no physical effects. Her mind, on the other hand, was a very different story. She'd vacillate wildly between a state of borderline catatonia and extreme paranoid distress. In a debriefing meeting with a Foundation researcher, she had difficulty recounting what exactly had happened during her test with SCP-080. When she did begin to recollect, she started screaming in terror and yelling about how they would try to take her back to the monster. Then, without warning, she leaped across the table and began to attack the researcher, forcing the attending guards to intervene, and unfortunately, they were forced to terminate her. It seemed as though this was always the intended effect of her outburst. She preferred death from a Foundation guard over experiencing SCP-080 again. The testing continued, though, and a third subject was sent into the room, a 24-year-old D-Class male dosed on a powerful amphetamine to hopefully ward off the drowsiness-inducing effects of SCP-080. This did not appear to work, though, and over time, the same sleepiness started to set in. The amphetamine, however, still caused elevated levels of aggression, and the D-Class began to express violent intent towards SCP-080. He approached the vaporous mass and attempted to strike it, but when his fist touched the entity, he immediately collapsed. When his body was retrieved, it was found that he died of a sudden massive heart attack. During the autopsy, as Foundation staff examined his body, they reported feeling a profound sense of discomfort and unease, as though they were being watched. The retrieval team also reported feeling acutely aware of SCP-080 watching them as they exited the chamber with the final D-Class's body. The mere presence of SCP-080 then started causing problems for some staff members at the containment site. The researchers assigned to SCP-080 reported strange and unsettling dreams, and that they were occurring at an unusually frequent level, disrupting their sleep patterns and, by extension, their work performance. This led to them discovering the possibility that SCP-080 may have some kind of hazardous mimetic effect that can linger among its victims even when they aren't in its direct proximity. After the lead researcher on the team walked into traffic and sadly passed away, it was made mandatory for all staff members working in SCP-080's sector to keep comprehensive dream journals so that the emergence of patterns of violent or unsettling dreams could be detected before things got too out of hand, just like they had with the lead researcher. However, the lead researcher would not be the last to lose his life to SCP-080. Two researchers stood just beyond the blackout curtains, observing SCP-080 for 40 minutes, believing that the divider would keep them safe from SCP-080's negative anomalous effects. They were terribly wrong. Both apparently fell asleep in the observation area, and when another researcher later entered the room, they discovered that their bodies were gone. However, strangely enough, everyone working in that sector of the site found that they did have a better night's sleep after the incident. Staff were reminded to exercise maximum caution whenever interfacing with SCP-080. Their direct exposure should never exceed 30 minutes under any circumstances, even the section of staff members that, for some reason, are completely unable to see SCP-080 and appear to somehow be immune to its effects. Considering the fact that everyone around the site started feeling better after the strange incident concerning the two missing researchers, researchers have sought O5 Council permission to feed a D-Class to the monster once a month in order to negate the damaging effects it has on site staff mental health. Despite the protests of the Ethics Committee, a member of the Council approved the measure. SCP-080 is contained in a 4-meter by 4-meter room with a smaller antechamber located on the south wall for easy research access. There's also an observation room on the north wall, separated with blackout curtains to prevent light from getting in and dispersing SCP-080. Containment procedures dictate that SCP-080 should never, under any circumstances, be removed from the chamber. Any light-producing devices are also forbidden. While the Foundation currently has this monster under lock and key, all it would take is a stray ray of light to free it once more, which has warranted it being given the Euclid containment class. All members of staff are also kindly remembered to stop referring to this creature as the Boogeyman. After all, there's a lot of power in giving a fear-manipulating creature a name like that, and the last thing we want is SCP-080 having more power than it already has.
The plan had sounded so simple, the thief thinks to himself, one of many thoughts that ring loudly in his panicking brain. He wished he could hit a magic undo button to take everything back from the second it all started to unravel. Anything to reverse what happened to the prisoner. Except, it's too late. The beast lumbering through the dark lab is no longer the person that the thief once knew. It's not even human anymore. And what makes that fact even worse is knowing that it's all his fault. As he hears the heavy step of something more closely resembling a blob than a foot, the thief wishes he'd never found out about that cursed locket. Little more than a few months earlier, the would-be thief isn't quite ready to enact his plan yet. In fact, the idea hasn't even entered his mind and won't until a chance meeting. It's during this time that he's just an average researcher, working in the ranks of the SCP Foundation. Well, as average as someone in that line of work can be, which is to say he's a researcher who doesn't have the power to nullify reality-warping powers around him and is just an ordinary human rather than a talking dog in a lab coat. Chances are, if he avoids the encounter he's about to have, then our researcher could have a long-lasting future at the Foundation ahead of him. Not as the head of any of the major research departments, of course, more as an upper-middle management type, never really experiencing the safety and fulfillment that comes from making it to the top of the food chain, but still having a few researchers below his station that he can boss around whenever he's having a bad day. That course of action will all be averted, though, when he meets the prisoner. Sent to deliver a file to another member of personnel in the medical bay, the researcher catches the eye of the prisoner, a D-class personnel, denoted by the uniform. They get to talking, a perfectly innocent conversation. Then, as the days and weeks pass, the two of them see each other again and again. The prisoner never leaves the medical wing, confined to an uncomfortable bed. But despite all the discomfort he's experiencing, conversing with the researcher soon becomes the highlight of his days. It doesn't ease the pain, but it distracts him from it, at least for a few moments. After some time passes, the two's topic of conversation eventually turns to what landed the prisoner on this gurney in the first place. That's when everything changes. The prisoner explains his predicament, and it's quite a sorry story. He's got a terminal illness, and worse, the Foundation gave it to him. They want to test out the capabilities of an anomalous locket that, apparently, has nearly limitless healing properties. But in order to do so, the Foundation knowingly contaminated the prisoner's bloodstream. Now he's in agony, his cells practically destroying themselves as he approaches the late stages. It's only when he reaches death's door that he'll be brought in for testing with the locket. However, that could mean weeks or even months of excruciating pain in the meantime. Hearing about all of this makes the researcher start to well up. He's only ever heard rumors of this anomalous locket and knows that he'd receive disciplinary punishment if he acted against the Foundation. And that would be the best-case scenario. Worst case, he'd probably find himself dosed up with amnestics and left on a sidewalk somewhere. But seeing the prisoner in so much pain, and knowing there was something on site that could help him, the researcher couldn't deny his own sense of empathy. And so, he vows to help. It'd be the kindest, most well-intentioned mistake he'd ever make. It's just a shame that, like they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The thief tries to sneak through the corridors of the facility as naturally as possible. Nobody can know what he's just done, how he's just betrayed the Foundation. It'll cost him his job, his future, his whole life. His trembling fingers grip the cool metal of the locket as it sits in the bottom of his lab coat pocket. He catches the eye of everyone he walks past, the fear that someone's onto him, thumping in his chest. Does he know? What about her? They look too. What if they found out? With the stolen locket firmly in his hand and his hand buried in his lab coat, he retraces his steps back towards the medical bay. One good deed for the prisoner. He'd use the locket to heal him up, then hurry back to the containment case to put it back where it belongs. That's the plan. Seeing the prisoner change before his very eyes somehow isn't the worst part. The formless mass of flesh that his body rapidly reforms into is certainly a horrific sight to behold. But to the thief, who could have just carried on as an uncaring researcher, the worst part is somehow the knowledge that the prisoner is gone. All that's left in his place is the monstrosity. And it's his fault. His good intention hadn't saved the man from his illness at all. Instead, hell is stalking the thief through the medical bay in the form of a terrifying flesh beast. And because no good deed goes unpunished, the unfortunate researcher turned thief doesn't live to see himself disciplined by his superiors at the Foundation. Instead, this newly created flesh beast reaches out and wraps its terrible claw around the researcher's throat. It tosses him across the room the way a child might carelessly throw a doll, and before he can stand, the creature is upon him, tearing into him with all its disgusting new appendages. It's the only ending you can expect when dealing with the Lovecraftian Locket. Jewelry. It's one of humanity's strange little quirks. Nowhere else in the world will you find another species, be it a mammal, an amphibian, a reptile, or otherwise, that finds joy in adorning its body with pieces of metal or precious stones. For some, jewelry is a signifier of wealth and status, and it's been that way for centuries. The crown jewels worn by kings in centuries gone by are just the precursor to someone wasting 6 months of their salary on a Rolex just to show off to their coworkers, who I guarantee aren't as impressed as they might pretend to be. Sorry, Gerald. Of course, in either case, there's nothing inherently special about any of these. They're all just material objects to be bought or sold. But let's say you were to possess a piece of jewelry that was actually special, perhaps even anomalous. Then you can bet that'd set it apart. In fact, anyone who's anyone would most likely pay top dollar to get their hands on something like that. Sadly, you'll never find SCP-427 up for auction or being appraised at a pawn shop, although that might be for the best. To understand exactly what SCP-427 is, where it came from, and what it can do, you'll need to first become familiar with another pair of anomalies that the SCP Foundation currently has in containment. First and foremost, SCP-500. While the origin of these seemingly mundane little pills isn't known, or is at least kept classified by the Foundation, what they can do has been well documented over the years. SCP-500 is a small plastic container that contains a remaining 47 anomalous red pills. These pills are known to have near instantaneous healing properties, able to not only treat, but outright cure any and all diseases. The potential of SCP-500's use is nearly limitless when it comes to remedying various dangerous afflictions, even anomalous ones. However, the limited number of pills available forces the Foundation to use them as sparingly as possible. They have conducted a number of cross-tests using the SCP-500 pills, particularly for correcting anomalous conditions such as SCP-008, otherwise known colloquially as the zombie plague. Given its name, you can probably imagine what this disease can do. However, a dose of SCP-500 is able to offer a subject infected with SCP-008 a full recovery, even if suffering from the advanced stages of this zombifying disease. Perhaps as a result of seeing how effective SCP-500 was at treating anomalous ailments, one Foundation researcher puts in a request to use one of the pills in an experiment involving a second SCP. This researcher is none other than Dr. Charles Gears, a respected, long-serving, and high-ranking member of Foundation personnel, albeit a man known to have a little trouble when it comes to expressing any sort of emotional response in any given situation. Nonetheless, it is Dr. Gears' suggestion for an SCP-500 cross-testing experiment that, although he has no idea, is inevitably going to lead to the creation of SCP-427. And in order to do so, will involve the use of another anomaly, SCP-914, better known as the Clockworks. SCP-914 is a collection of various clockwork components, a mass of springs, gyros, gears, and cogs, all forming one giant machine with two booths labeled Input and Output, respectively. There is a dial between both of these booths, denoting a number of settings ranging from rough to very fine. The purpose of this clockwork contraption? Well, that's simple. Based on what setting the dial is turned to, SCP-914 will either destroy, dismantle, recreate, or refine any item or being placed within the input booth. And when set to the highest setting, very fine, the item being improved is usually given anomalous properties. So can you guess what Dr. Gears' suggestion was? He puts in a request for one of the SCP-500 pills for testing with SCP-914. Not all requests are approved, given how limited the number of pills are, but knowing what the Clockworks is capable of, and that refining SCP-500 has the potential to create a more effective version of the all-curing red pills, the Foundation higher-ups grant approval for Dr. Gears' request. He's cleared to go ahead with his experiment, and so is given one of the SCP-500 pills to place into the Clockwork's input booth. Turning the dial of SCP-914 to the Fine setting, which usually improves an item but rarely adds any anomalous properties to it, Dr. Gears takes a step back to a safe distance as the machine whirs to life. Components start turning and ticking, the Clockwork's refining the little red pill it's been given, turning it from just one single dose into, well, not what anyone has been expecting. Dr. Gears perhaps most likely thought that SCP-914 would produce a new, more effective version of the SCP-500 pills. It's hard to see how a pill that cures all diseases could be improved upon, of course, but regardless, what the Clockworks turned that one pill into was perhaps the furthest thing Dr. Gears or anyone else thought they'd get out of this experiment. After the noise of the Clockworks grinding to life dies out, sitting in the output booth is an entirely new object. It's like the machine conjured it from out of thin air and made it brand new out of nowhere. It's not a pill, not even a serum, a topical ointment, or any other form of new and improved wonder drug. It's a locket, a piece of jewelry, an item that will henceforth be classified as SCP-427 once the Foundation learns exactly what this anomalous object can do. Naturally, Dr. Gears is eager to inspect and test out the capabilities of this new anomaly of his own, albeit accidental, creation. The locket itself is quite a beautiful thing. A small metallic sphere made of a polished silver substance, decorated with ornate carvings. As quickly becomes evident, the carvings on the surface of SCP-427 don't actually serve any inherent purpose. They just make the locket itself look more like an elegant piece of jewelry. As Dr. Gears and his research team examine the locket, they notice no unusual or abnormal qualities presenting themselves, aside from the anomalous nature of SCP-427's creation. Although that's only as long as the small silver locket remains closed. When it is then opened up for examination purposes, that's when they find something curious inside. Within SCP-427, visible when it's opened up, is a small glowing orb contained in the center of the locket. Worried this orb might be dangerous, Dr. Gears orders an immediate test of the anomalous item's radiation levels, but luckily, it is quickly discovered that the object at its center emits no radiation or energy of any kind beyond the visible light energy that causes it to glow. But having SCP-427 open, that's when something strange happens. One of Dr. Gears' research assistants possessed some rather severe burns on his skin, the result of an accident that occurred when the assistant was a child. However, upon opening SCP-427, it quickly becomes evident that the scarring left behind from the assistant's unfortunate burns have been rapidly healed. Dr. Gears is astounded and instructs another of his colleagues to open up SCP-427. The hand-picked researcher has been suffering with the common cold, sniffling and coughing all over the facility. Normally, a minor infection like that takes between 3 to 10 days to make its way through the immune system and eventually leave. But as the phlegmy researcher stands in the presence of SCP-427 while the locket is open, his cold is rapidly cured in the space of only a few minutes. It is soon determined that the healing properties of SCP-427 are emitted directionally, meaning that someone has to be standing within direct line of sight of the glowing orb at the locket's center. And of course, it doesn't take long for additional testing to take place. Only a short while later, Dr. Gears is placing requests to his superiors within the Foundation for any and all members of D-Class personnel with any long-term illnesses, physical afflictions, or any otherwise damaged biological tissue to be reassigned to serve as test subjects for SCP-427. Much like the SCP-500 pill it was refined from, the anomalous locket seems to have near-limitless regenerative capabilities. But unlike the little red pills, there is no finite number to worry about. Just stand in line with the glowing orb within, and all that ails you is cured. With an object like SCP-427, the world could truly be healed of all diseases and injury. Illnesses could be removed from human life entirely. Maybe that's Dr. Gears' intention, despite how cold and emotionless he seems. After all, who wouldn't want to heal the world? But, like with a certain thief and a certain prisoner, sometimes the noblest of intentions can lead to some nasty, unforeseen outcomes. The Foundation records don't indicate which was the first experiment with SCP-427 to produce the more undesirable side effect to its anomalous healing capabilities. Although knowing Foundation protocol, it's highly likely the subject of this experiment is a member of D-Class. And it's a safe bet that the outcome of such a disaster is what will give SCP-427 its new ominous nickname, the Lovecraftian Locket. The thing is, SCP-427 doesn't just heal, it improves. As it repairs cellular damage, acting in much the way SCP-500 does when taken orally, the Locket also optimizes the natural systems of a person's body. And in one subject in particular, the Foundation soon observes the risks that come with the overuse of SCP-427. We'll call this subject, our Mystery Member D-Class personnel, the patient. Following exposure to the Lovecraftian Locket, the patient's natural resistance to diseases, toxins, and other dangers to their immune system is increased by 500%. And that's only after 10 minutes of healing time from SCP-427, better than full immunization against anything and everything. Curious to see how much further the Locket can improve a subject's natural resistances, if it even can at all, Dr. Gears and his researchers place the patient within the range of SCP-427's regenerative effect once again. This time, the exposure goes on for an extra 5 minutes, taking the duration up to 15. Monitoring all of the patient's vitals and charting any internal or external bodily change, the research team noticed that the patient seems to be getting stronger. Their muscular system is optimized, as if someone has programmed their body to its peak level of performance. Conducting further testing, Dr. Gears determined that the patient's pain tolerance and overall physical strength shows an increase of between 200 and 300%. Then they try exposing the patient again for over an hour this time, and that's when everything goes wrong. Before the researchers' very eyes, the patient's muscle and flesh start to mutate rapidly and uncontrollably. They shift from a normal human to a thing ripped straight out of a nightmare. What the Foundation scientists are only just realizing, in the most horrific fashion, is that the effects of SCP-427 are cumulative. They stack on top of one another, and continued exposure accelerates the amount of time it takes for the human body to apply the changes granted by the Locket, meaning that after so much exposure to SCP-427, the patient is converting at a rapid rate into a sickening, shapeless mass of tissue until they're not even human anymore, but a terrifying beast of nothing but flesh. These flesh beasts, as the researchers take to calling the creatures thanks to their horrific appearance, quickly prove to be highly aggressive. The security personnel that move in to contain the beast that was once the patient learned this in a quick, brutal fashion, as the newly formed flesh beast attacks the guards on site with messy, fatal results. Drawing their weapons, the surviving security officers open fire at the creature, which shows itself to be highly resistant to conventional firearms. Despite being comprised of flesh, the beast shrugs off bullets like they're little more than minor annoyances. Fortunately for the security personnel who haven't yet been slaughtered, they have a few other less conventional weapons on hand that might just do the trick. It takes a few unsuccessful tries and a lot of wasted ammo, but soon a successful way to neutralize the flesh beast is deployed. It turns out that a sufficient excess of heat, in excess of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, is enough to cause the flesh beast's bodily mass to combust. Given how aggressive the creatures are towards Foundation personnel during subsequent intentional attempts to recreate them, Dr. Gears and his fellow researchers can't gauge exactly how intelligent the flesh beasts are. But by mapping the biological optimizations that SCP-427 grants a subject, Foundation researchers have determined that the Lovecraftian Locket causes a significant enhancement to the brain, as well as the muscle and immune systems. After all, the brain is responsible for regulating all bodily functions. This means that the intelligence levels of a fully transformed flesh beast could exceed that of the average human. For now, despite the risks of mutation, SCP-427 is used as a partial replacement for the SCP-500 pills, given their limited number. While the Locket is able to cure any ailment that the pills can, total exposure time must be recorded, as the optimizations granted by SCP-427 are cumulative in all subjects. Given the potentially adverse side effects of continued SCP-427 use, only medical staff with a Class 3 clearance level are permitted to handle or use the Lovecraftian Locket. The O5 Council deems this to be an acceptable risk, and should anyone show any signs of sufficient mutations, they are to be terminated before they transform into a flesh beast. Any instances of a full mutation, now referred to as SCP-427-1, are to be killed immediately through means of incineration, since they are considered too aggressive to communicate with or experiment on. On second thought, perhaps I was a little too harsh on the Rolexes earlier. There are flies on the inside of the window when you arrive. Hundreds of them, crawling. This isn't what you want to see when you go to visit a buddy that you haven't heard from in a few days, but you're not a fair-weather friend. You hammer on the door, trying to put all the worst assumptions out of your mind, until, to your immense relief, he answers. He looks terrible, clad in a shoddy bathrobe covered in stains, his face a mask of grease and whiskers, his unwashed hair clinging to his forehead. You've never seen his eyes so tired. You could carry a week's groceries in the bags underneath them. And he's pointing a loaded, double-barreled shotgun at your chest. You step back, holding up your hands to show you mean no harm. You don't know what the hell has gotten into him, but you're not going to take your chances. Something is wrong here. Something is awfully, awfully wrong. He asks you your birthday. For a second, you just freeze in confusion, like a rabbit about to get zeroed by the front tires of a big rig. Your friend rests the stock of the shotgun against his shoulder and looks at you down the sights. At that moment, it sinks in. He really might kill you if you don't answer. Under threat of violence, you choke out the date. After a tense pause, your friend nods and stows the shotgun. He apologizes for scaring you, but adds that these days, you really can't be too careful. About what? Is the unspoken question that hangs in the air. He invites you inside, and despite your firearm-inspired reservations, you decide to accept the invitation. The least you can do is give him a proper wellness check. The inside of his house does nothing to settle your concerns. Food is left out on the tables and takeout containers, crawling with maggots. Dirty clothes are strewn across the floor. He stops you just before you step into a bear trap he's laid in the middle of the foyer. Your friend has always been an eccentric type. He'd been openly enthusiastic about all things strange and paranormal, spending hours on that goofy Parawatch forum that he'd always talk your ear off about after a few beers. All blurry photos of smudges that were supposedly UFOs or ghosts or cryptids or whatever else. You've never bought into all that stuff, but you figured it was just a harmless hobby for your buddy. Some guys had bowling or fantasy football. He had his ghosts and ghouls. But everything in front of you is like a big, glaring neon light that screams he's lost his mind. Soon enough, you're in the living room, surrounded by stacks of books and printed off sheets of paper. There's also a .38 revolver on the coffee table, with a few loose rounds in the ashtray. You didn't know what concerned you more, that, the shotgun, or the .45 automatic that was resting on top of a book titled Shapeshifters of European Folklore by Duncan Blute. You're starting to wonder whether your friend is more a danger to himself or everyone else right now. All this time, he just keeps muttering, "You can't be too careful, man, you can't be too careful." He lays the shotgun across the coffee table, knocking some pamphlets about ley lines and shadow people onto the ground. He rubs his face, and you can feel the organic sound of it stretching against his skull, like everything about him has started to sag. You suggest that maybe he should take a shower and get himself together, maybe even shave if he felt up to it. You'd be a good friend and keep watch down here while he did it. He takes some persuading, but eventually agrees, on the condition that he can load his .38 and take it up to the bathroom with him. You give some pushback on that, but soon relent. The smell of him is starting to make you feel a little sick. As he slumps his way upstairs towards the bathroom, you're left alone in the living room, sitting among the wreckage of a good friend's seemingly shattered mind. He'd always been a little obsessive, but this took the cake and then some. Once you can hear the shower running upstairs, you start rifling through the books and papers stacked around the room. Maybe there's some clue in all this, some indication of what caused your buddy's spectacular downward spiral. Entities among us, the hidden creatures, how to ward off dark spirits. This is not the home library of a well-adjusted man. But strangest of all is something you find among the papers, heavily circled and annotated. It's a text printout from some janky Web 2.0 GeoCities-looking site, with the heading, "On Encounters with the One with 1,000 Faces." You scan through the text until your eyes seem to snag on a small excerpt. The One is not an animal, though it can appear to be at will. It is an intelligent being, very old and very patient.
By the time it has selected you, it is already too late, but it will always prolong the chase. Over a week, it will hunt for you. It will stalk you. It will wear faces both alien and familiar to get close to you. Then, it will find you in the night, at your most defenseless, and steal away your... 3 gunshots ring out upstairs, and your heart takes an express elevator into your throat. No, not like this. You run upstairs, taking 3 at a time, chest burning with anxiety. You see water seeping out from under the bathroom door and soaking into the carpet. With a rough kick, you smash the door open and barge in. You see your friend huddled in the corner, wet and crying, the .38 still gripped tight in his shaking fist. By the looks of it, he's blown 3 holes through the wall in the bottom left corner of the room. The shower door hangs open, water spraying everywhere. You lean in and shut it off. Then you turn to the pitiful sight of your friend, somehow feeling more sad than afraid. He chokes out between sobs. I thought I saw a rat. He's left you no choice. You call an ambulance and tell them that your friend is undergoing some kind of severe psychotic break. He needs to be under observation for his own good. When the proverbial men in white coats come to collect him, he doesn't go peacefully. They were all just lucky that you'd already taken his guns and locked them in a different room. But that didn't stop him from clawing, biting, and punching the 2 EMTs who did everything they could to get him strapped to the gurney. No, you can't take me, he screamed. If you take me, it'll get me! It'll get me! With the din of sirens and the flash of emergency lights, your friend is gone. You gave your phone number to the EMTs as the first point of contact if there are any complications, a clumsy and unpleasant euphemism, and you promise yourself that you'll visit him as soon as the staff at the hospital tell you it's safe to do so. You know in your heart that you've done the right thing, but you still go home feeling shaken. That night, your apartment feels extra empty. Every dark shadow seems to hold some unspoken guilt. Something you should have said or should have done. Something that would have stopped it all from getting this bad. Maybe it was all down to you for being a bad friend. Soon enough, you're sitting in front of your TV, peeling the plastic film off the top of a microwave meal, and suddenly, your nostrils catch the most awful smell. Moldy, yet sickeningly sweet, like meat syrup. The shock of it almost makes you gag. You look down at your microwave meal, expecting to see it festering with maggots and an earthen rainbow of mold, just like all the repulsive, forgotten food at your friend's place. But no, the food is as pristine as it was when you first put it in the microwave. That smell has to be coming from somewhere else. You didn't have much of an appetite anyway after first catching that smell, so you stand and walk further into your apartment, searching for the source of the rot. But there's nothing you can see. No open garbage can, no leftovers left out too long. Did something die in the wall? No, if it did, you would have noticed it by now. Not long after that strange incident, the smell fades and you go about your business. Maybe it was just a sense memory. You've had a bit of a traumatic day after all. You decide to go to bed early that night. Tomorrow is a new day. But as you try to sleep, you get this strange sense that you're not alone in the apartment. A ringing phone wakes you up in the morning. Never a good sign. You answer while pulling on some jeans and a t-shirt to find that it's the hospital calling. Oh no. It's about your friend. There's been some kind of incident in the night. They'd really appreciate it if you could get down to the hospital at your earliest convenience. Your car is still in the shop after a fender bender last week, so you take the bus, the whole time inventing increasingly elaborate scenarios in your head of what could have happened overnight. But you never would have guessed what actually occurred. When you arrive, a nurse escorts you to the ward where he's being held, behind a set of translucent green curtains. She tells you he's under heavy sedation, and when you see him, try not to react too severely. A sentiment that has never calmed anyone down, ever. You step behind the curtain, and you can't stifle your gasp in time. Your friend's face. It's wrong. It doesn't look like it's been injured, just warped, like it had grown incorrectly overnight. Large, lumpy growths of skin seem to have changed the topography of his features. If it wasn't for his hair and the name on the clipboard at the foot of his bed, you wouldn't have even recognized it was him.
The nurse asks you if you're aware of any pre-existing conditions he may have had. Nothing that could have caused this. On the bus ride home, you just feel hollow. They say they'll contact you if they have any other questions, but you know ahead of time that you don't have answers. How could your friend have become disfigured overnight while tied up and on heavy sedation? It just didn't make any sense. That's when you smell it again, wafting down the aisle of the bus. That sickly sweet smell of rotting flesh. The smell from your friend's house. The smell from your apartment last night. You look up, trying to see the source of the phantom smell, as though the bus driver would be hanging a rotting carcass air freshener from the rearview mirror. But there's nothing. Just the back of everyone's heads staring impassively forward. Apart from one person, a few seats down from you. He's facing back. His eyes meet yours. He's smiling an oddly leering smile. And if you didn't know any better, you'd say he looks just like your friend. While it may seem like the mainstay of dark folk tales and modern internet creepypasta, I'm sorry to tell you that the entity you just witnessed is very real, and despite the Foundation's best efforts, it may be stalking you right now. This is SCP-5362, also known as the One with 1,000 Faces, a being endemic to Northern European folklore that has taken on an anomalous life of its own over the past several centuries, though records of the creature may go back all the way to the 11th century. Due to its nature as a shapeshifter, the anomaly has fit a number of different descriptions, but the most common is a pitiful creature indeed. A humanoid entity dressed in rags, frail and skinless, with no mouth and no eyelids. Its brain is also visible through a thin membrane on the top of its head, and if the physical appearance wasn't repulsive enough, eyewitness accounts have claimed that the anomaly smells like rotting meat. Now, more about that shape-shifting. The entity is able to take the shape of rodents such as mice and rats, completely bypassing any standard notions about conservation of mass. It's also capable of imitating the face of any living human, hence the moniker, the One with 1,000 Faces. During one of the few direct engagements that the Foundation have had with this frightening being, they were able to shoot it before it escaped, gaining some tissue to analyze. Its muscle tissue appears to be made out of specialized chromatophores, cells most commonly found in cephalopods such as octopi, that are able to consciously change their appearance for camouflage. The creature's head also contains a complex tube system, capable of moving around fat deposits at high speed, believed to be the primary biological function behind its ability to change the appearance of its face, along with several others that the Foundation hasn't yet categorized. The anomalous effects of SCP-5362 are activated by engaging with artistic or literary representations of the creature. In the past, this might have meant stumbling upon a dusty old book in the part of a library where nobody ever seems to tread. Or perhaps walking into the forbidden wing of a dead old man's private art gallery. The internet, however, has made SCP-5362 a far more widespread threat. When looking upon what you might think is just a cool horror illustration on Reddit, or reading what you find to be an abnormally eerie creepypasta, you may be signing yourself up for something far worse. What follows will be 7 days of waking nightmares, as the One with 1,000 Faces manifests in your life and begins stalking you. Little by little, your fear and paranoia will increase. Was that a whiff of rotting meat you caught? No, it must just be in your imagination. What was that figure you saw disappear behind a building? Was it just your imagination? You'll find that these kinds of questions often pass through your mind during the stalking period. Then, things will get considerably worse. After 7 days of ritualistic stalking, the One with 1,000 Faces will make physical contact while you're in a state of REM sleep. Once it has made contact, you'll notice a number of anomalous physical changes to your face over the coming days. Immediately after contact, you'll lose the use of some facial muscles, which will eventually lead to a full state of facial paralysis. Once the paralysis has set in, the facial features will begin to mutate, leading them to be covered in unsightly skin growths that will lead you to be unrecognizable. At this point, the switcheroo will be complete. The One with 1,000 Faces will have gained another visage, namely, yours. So the next time it's stalking a victim, it might be menacing them with your grin. Of course, this isn't an attractive prospect, so the Foundation has taken an interest in finding out how to prevent, stop, or even reverse this process. But these methods are hardly a picnic. The method that has the least negative effect on you would be the Foundation intervening while you're in REM sleep, while the one with 1,000 faces is attempting to make contact, which will cause it to panic and dematerialize. The other method of counteracting the anomaly is taking Class F amnestics, which has been known to delay or halt the physical effects of contact with SCP-5362, at the heavy cost of completely erasing your identity, meaning the Foundation will need to build you a new one from the ground up. It's a question worth sitting with. Which is more important to you in the grand scheme of things, your face or your sense of self? Because with SCP-5362, it might be one or the other. As for containment procedures, Foundation web crawlers are constantly on the prowl of anomalous depictions of SCP-5362 in art or literature. We can only hope that they don't get overzealous and include this video in that wide net, because the people need to know about SCP-5362 in the interest of their own safety. Depictions that have physical form, such as books or paintings, are to be confiscated and placed in Containment Locker B at Site-301 for secure storage. Due to the potential widespread exposure risk of the anomaly, it's been given the provisional containment risk Euclid. Anyone affected by the anomaly is to undergo a course of Class F amnestics, as mandated by the O5 Council. Any direct manifestations of the entity are to be monitored by MTF Pi 1, aka the City Slickers, to ensure that direct contact is prevented. You might be thinking, how can the Foundation have such a lock on an anomaly that seems so difficult to track and trace? This efficiency can be partially credited to just how long they've known about the one with 1,000 faces. It was actually first discovered by a Foundation precursor organization, His Majesty's Foundation for the Secure Containment of the Paranormal, or HMF-SCP, back in the 19th century. The Foundation's extensive mythology department has several legacy items on the nature of SCP-5362, generously donated from the collection of everyone's favorite telepathic nudibranch, Lord Blackwood. These items include this intriguing excerpt from the 18th edition of the book Monsters of the Developed World. Falling under the category of mimics, this entity I first heard of from the local populace of a small, little coastal village in the Isles of Great Britain. A farmer by the name of Frederick spoke of a foul beast hidden away in the Scottish Highlands, and perhaps even further out into the wild seas, that would steal the faces of the children who had not been on their best behavior. A simple folktale to scare the children into being nicer to their superiors, I thought. Yet, I was proven wrong. I had heard of the mystical and fantastical before, but nothing of this sort. Some kind of reddish humanoid creature, lacking many characteristics you'd consider universal across nature. It had an oblong head, with its brain visible through a white film. Beneath a broad brow sat two black eyes, with two nostrils in between. It had no mouth to speak of, only just flat bone in its place, atop a frail, grotesque body that emanated the stench of rotting carcasses. An unpleasant sight to see, to be sure, but I am not the type to back down from gaining new knowledge. It disappeared over the hills sometime later, and in an attempt to follow and track down the creature, we came across one of its victims. In a large field stood a cottage by its lonesome, a path of dead grass leading up to the front door. Somehow, ignoring the bolts and locks, this frail creature had busted the door open. Checking inside, I was greeted to the sight of a man who must have been in his late 70s, collapsed dead. Turning the body over, I came across his face. A layer of flesh had formed over his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, suffocating him as he attempted to leave through the door. Poor old chap. In legends, it said that the creature, once a child, was mocked for his appearance, to the point where he began to conspire with demonic forces in the hopes of releasing a deadly calamity on the people who wronged him. Like always, there was a price to pay, transforming him into the nightmare that plagues these lands today. I hope someday he finally finds peace. The rattlesnake strikes, sinking its fangs through the furry carapace of the tarantula. It writhes briefly on the golden sands, then goes limp. The desert is a brutal place. Here, it's eat or be eaten. A man walks through a remote desert landscape, a pack on his back. The sun dips down over the horizon, a welcome reprieve from the heat, but bringing its own new threats. The dangers of the day may be gone for now, but the dangers of the night are just beginning. As he walks, he hears a strange sound behind him. He turns, and by the dim light of the moon, he sees a mound of sand advancing toward him, as if blown by a storm, but there's no wind blowing. Frightened, he tries to run, but the dune gains on him until he is completely submerged. After a moment, the sand disperses, revealing nothing left but a skeleton. The dune travels off into the distance, disappearing from view. The desert is an unforgiving place for a traveler. The days are hot and dry, baking you with the relentless heat of the sun. The nights are cold and just as inhospitable as the desert's wild inhabitants come out of hiding, ready to attack any perceived threats or invaders. The year is 1908, and a cavalry troop on their way back to base are getting a crash course in just how brutal the Arizona desert can be. The trip has taken longer than anticipated, and their horses are growing sluggish from thirst, trudging slower and slower through the dust and sand. The soldiers' eyes sting from the sun, the sweat, and the lack of proper sleep. They need a place to hang their hats for the night, to have a hearty meal and a tall glass of water, and maybe something stronger too after all this trouble. As if in answer to their prayers, the men suddenly spotted a faded sign for a town further down the road. Only 1 mile left to Fredericksburg, it said. They would be able to reach the town by sundown, a welcome reprieve from sleeping on the ground and watching their supplies dwindle day by day. The mile seems to stretch on forever, but they persist and reach their oasis, the town of Fredericksburg. They aren't exactly expecting a welcome parade upon their arrival, but they're still shocked by how tepid a reception is waiting for them. Here they are, members of the Army Cavalry, and no one comes out to greet them, or even to see who the strange men in uniform on horses might be. As a matter of fact, the men don't see anyone at all, not one single soul. They stop in the middle of the town square, climbing down from their horses, and call out, shouting at the top of their lungs. Still, no doors fling open, no windows are cracked, and no one comes to see what all the commotion was. The only evidence that anyone was ever there at all is the buildings themselves, and a few handwritten signs posted throughout the area. The signs are all in German, and none of the soldiers can speak enough German to read them. If they could, they would probably leave the town as quickly as possible, hop on their horses and gallop away until it vanishes from view. But they can't, so they don't. One of the men suggests that the town is abandoned, that it's become a ghost town. The more they see of the town, the more they think he might be right. The buildings are still in good condition, but there's no one inside. It's as if the entire town got up one day and decided to leave it all behind. Then, it sat untouched until the cavalry came. So one of the other men wonders, what should they do? The plan doesn't have to change, another one suggests. A night's sleep in an abandoned town is far better than another night of setting up camp and sleeping on the ground. Near the edge of town, they find a tavern and an adjoining hotel. There may not be any staff or other lodgers, but there's a stable for the horses, plenty of beds, and a few unopened bottles behind the bar. That's more than enough for the night. So they tie up the horses, have a few drinks, sing a few drinking songs, and settle in for what is sure to be the best sleep they've had in many, many days. They're so exhausted and so relieved to find shelter that they don't stop for one moment to wonder what might have caused the residents of Fredericksburg to abandon their homes all at once. Ghost towns don't come out of nowhere, after all. Ghosts have to be made. But exhaustion is a powerful thing, and the allure of a soft, if dusty bed is hard to resist when one's bones are aching and eyelids are growing heavy. So instead of asking questions, they sleep. A deep, blissfully ignorant sleep. A few hours later, one of the men suddenly wakes, jolted from slumber by a horrible high-pitched neigh. One neigh quickly becomes a chorus as more voices join in. The horses, something's wrong. He jumps out of bed and runs down to the stable, expecting to see a rattlesnake or a coyote, or perhaps a thief who snuck into town to loot the empty houses. What he finds is far more disturbing than he ever could have anticipated. The horses are in a state of sheer panic, stamping their hooves and tossing their heads back, eyes rolling wildly in their sockets. As he attempts to find the source of their terror, the man realizes that there are fewer horses in the stable than there were when the men went to bed. Did the others somehow escape? He turns to inspect the stable and sees 7 piles of clean, white bones where there once were horses. 1 pile of bones for each missing horse. It's impossible, but he's looking at it with his own eyes. Something was in here with the horses. It attacked, and it devoured them whole and left only the bones behind. What sort of creature could have done this? None that he wants to meet, that's for sure. There isn't anything in the stable anymore, no threat that he can see. He needs to get back inside and warn the rest of the men before whatever did this decides to come back. The other soldiers aren't thrilled to be woken up in the middle of the night, and they're even less thrilled when they hear the wild story of what the man saw down there in the stable. But still, they've never seen him so afraid. So they reluctantly pull themselves out of bed, and some of the less bleary-eyed men agree to join him in investigating the situation. While they head down to the stable to look for potential danger, the rest of the men roll back over in bed and close their eyes. No use losing sleep over a situation that's as good as handled. They'll take care of the snake or would-be thief or what have you, and come morning, it'll all be fine anyway. Down at the stable, the horses have calmed down. Whatever preyed on the 7 horses reduced to bone, it's gone now. But even though the horses have stilled, the soldiers do not feel comforted. There's still the mystery of what could have done this. They were afraid of what they might find when they came down to investigate, but finding nothing is somehow worse. They were only asleep for a matter of hours before the horses started screaming. What manner of beast or man could have done away with 7 horses in that time? There isn't an animal they can conceive of capable of feeding so efficiently. Sure, a wolf can kill quickly, but to kill 7 times in a row without a sound, without a fight, and to clean the bones of any speck of meat, all without being caught, it seems like the work of something beyond the natural world. One of the more superstitious soldiers, pale and trembling, suggests that the abandoned town must be haunted by a vengeful and hungry spirit. It demanded an offering in exchange for their trespassing here, and took the horses as a sacrifice. The others laugh at him, but secretly, they're just as frightened as him. They're supposed to be brave in the face of the unknown, but it's the dead of night in a town with no people, and something is eating the horses. Meanwhile, back in the hotel, many of the other men struggle to get back to sleep. They're exhausted, the remnants of sleep still clouding their eyes and weighing down their heads, but the insistent, nervous pounding of their hearts is keeping them awake. They are suddenly acutely aware of the complete silence that surrounds them. In the dark, they can't hear anything but their own breathing, quick and shallow. Then, suddenly, another sound breaks through the quiet. It's a soft sound, like a tide rushing ashore. Sand on sand, the flow of something. A gentle, scraping sound. What is that? Could it be the wind? Doesn't sound like any wind they've ever heard. For one thing, it's coming from inside the building. For another, it's getting closer. One curious soldier climbs out of bed to seek out the source of the noise. He opens the door to his room, squinting to make out shapes among the shadows. At first, he thinks the motel must be flooding. Something's pouring into the hall, spilling across the floor and flowing closer and closer. But as it approaches, he sees that it isn't water at all. It's sand. He can't see where it's coming from or how it came into the building in the first place, but that doesn't matter. It's slowly filling the building, and more importantly, it seems to be headed straight for him. Instinctively, he jumps back into his room, slamming the door shut to block the flood of sand. But he didn't account for the crack under the door. And as he watches, the sand begins spilling into his room from beneath the door. It moves as if it were alive, creeping across the floor toward him. He scrambles backward, jumping onto the bed to avoid the tide of sand. Still, it advances closer and closer, piling up until it can reach him there. There's no doubt about it. This is no ordinary sand. It isn't just filling the room at the urging of gravity or some sort of indoor storm. It's deliberately creeping, advancing, hunting. He glances around the room, desperate for a means of escape, but there's nowhere to run. The only way out is the door, blocked by the ever-increasing tide of sand. It rises to the height of the bed, spilling onto the mattress and preparing to engulf him. He isn't certain what will happen to him when it does, but he's looked death in the face enough times to recognize it on sight. The sand is covering his feet now, climbing up his legs, ready to cover his body and swallow him whole. He opens his mouth to scream, and sand pours through his lips, filling his throat and lungs. He collapses onto the bed under the weight of the assault, and he disappears. One of the sleeping soldiers wakes to the sound of a scream from the next room. He goes to sit up, but finds his arm is strangely heavy. He looks over and is shocked to see that his arm is covered with sand. And the sand is moving, undulating on his arm like a swarm of tiny creatures. He tries to shake them loose, but for some reason, his arm feels paralyzed. With his other hand, he swipes at the sand, brushing it away as quickly as possible to reveal the arm beneath. When he can see it, he wishes he couldn't. Bone, a skeleton hand poking from beneath the sleeve of his nightshirt. He flies into a blind panic, stumbling out of bed, his bone arm dangling useless at his side, and fumbles with the doorknob, desperate to escape. But the sand is relentless, already swarming around his feet and weighing him down. Before he can take a single step out of the room, the swarm of sand overtakes him, and he is buried in a living grave. Throughout the hotel, once thought to be abandoned, but now clearly occupied by something hungry, the men flee their rooms, abandoning belongings to the flood of sand. As they run, they see more and more sand pouring into the walls like waves and waves of water ready to drown them. They pull on their boots to protect their bare feet and sprint as fast as their legs will carry them, jumping and weaving around the piles of sand to avoid being eaten until they make it outside. There, the other men have begun to prepare the horses, the horrified screams from inside having served as a pretty clear indication that it is time to take their leave. As they mount their horses and prepare to flee, they realize that 4 men are missing from their ranks. One soldier suggests that they run back inside, perform a rescue mission, and try to recover the missing 4. But it is obvious that no one wants to step foot back into that sandy den of death. They don't want to leave any men behind, but the choice is between 4 men and all of them. The sight of another wave of sand pouring through the hotel's door makes up their minds for them, and they climb onto their horses, some riding 2 men to 1 horse, and gallop out of Fredericksburg into the night. The 4 men lost to the sands will never be seen again, joining the rest of Fredericksburg's ghosts. Though it wouldn't be classified for many more years, these unfortunate men had encountered the deadly appetite of SCP-165. SCP-165's organic component resembles a typical parasitic mite, each instance of which is 750 micrometers in length, with 8 legs and the genetic structure similar to that of a house dust mite. The main difference between these organisms and the dust mites they resemble is their hermit crab-like tendency to attach grains of sand to their backs for an as-of-yet unknown purpose. The creatures travel as a colony, numbering in the hundreds of billions or even trillions, giving the appearance of a large dune of sand. In spite of their tendency to move as a pack, SCP-165 instances do not cooperate with one another. Instead, they act in competition with each other, fighting over food with an insatiable appetite. Much like mosquitoes, these mites detect their prey by sensing carbon dioxide and sugars in the air. Once this prey has been sniffed out, the mites will use their legs to climb over each other, rolling toward their target until they have enveloped it. The bite of SCP-165 releases a numbing chemical toxin, similar to the toxins found in mosquito and flea bites. The subject will be unable to tell that millions of mites are biting at their flesh until it is far too late. The swarm stripping them down to the bone in minutes. This numbing effect works so well that some victims have been completely devoured in their sleep without ever once waking up. The SCP-165 mites are nearly invulnerable, resistant to all but the deadliest pesticides. They do, however, avoid heat, seeking shade whenever available, and being the most active at night. They show a preference for large, sleeping prey. This dislike for heat and apparent vulnerability to it is the most useful method for containing the mites. While investigating the initial discovery of SCP-165 by the SCP Foundation, I discovered an addendum to the official file. Though some portions had been redacted for, I presume, security purposes, I was able to piece together the most relevant information. From what I can surmise, the United States government has been aware of the existence of SCP-165 for at least 80 years. The mites were first discovered in Fredericksburg, Arizona, a forgotten town formerly populated largely by German immigrants. This town is also, I must note, located in the Tule Desert near the Goldwater Air Force bombing range. Fredericksburg was founded in the late 1800s, and by 1908, it had become a ghost town. Its sudden, strange emptiness was discovered by a passing cavalry troop, who quickly discovered that there was a reason for the disappearance of Fredericksburg's inhabitants. This much I essentially already knew. What I didn't know, however, is that the United States government attempted to exterminate SCP-165 in the late 1950s. In fact, this goal is attributed to the creation of a bombing range in the area, though I was unable to officially confirm this. The bombing range and its subsequent use was able to successfully reduce the population of SCP-165. However, the explosives were insufficient to completely eradicate the threat. So, in the late 1980s, the SCP Foundation opted to intervene and deploy a ground cleanup and extraction team. Mobile Task Force Epsilon 9, aka Fire Eaters, was dispatched to Fredericksburg to extract and contain SCP-165 by any means necessary. Upon entering the decrepit town, the task force was met with an ominous sight. Vacant buildings lined the streets, left in disrepair but otherwise untouched. The only sign that life was ever there at all was the bones, animal and human alike, littering the dusty ground. One MTF member spotted a sign, hand-lettered in German, reading, Vorsicht vor dem kriechenden hungrigen Sand. Though he didn't speak German, one of his fellow task force members did, and translated it for the others. Beware the creeping, hungry sands. With this ominous warning in mind, MTF Epsilon 9 advanced into a nearby house to investigate. There, they found the floors completely covered with mounds of sand. The untrained eye might just assume that this was ordinary sand, but the task force knew better. These were instances of SCP-165 hiding from the heat and sunlight beneath the shelter of this roof. At the first sign of movement, their suspicions were confirmed, and the MTF members produced their flamethrowers, assaulting SCP-165 with blasts of fire until the movement ceased. These measures proved highly successful, melting the sand to glass and repelling whatever mites were not trapped inside. A living dune made up of 4 metric tons of SCP-165 was contained and transported to ABC Area 14. SCP-165 is contained in a facility at Armed Biocontainment Area 14. SCP-165 is considered to be a contagious, pathological organism, and so containing it requires the highest sterilization and quarantine procedures to be followed. There are microwave field generators placed around SCP-165's containment area in order to restrict the movement of the dune. Once every 9 days, the mass of SCP-165 is to be fed at least 750 kilograms of live cattle. Attempts to feed the entities via pre-slaughtered food sources have proven ineffective. For whatever reason, they prefer live prey. Unfortunate for the cows, but the Ethics Committee has proposed that they be sedated prior to feeding time in order to minimize potential suffering. We tend to associate sand with discomfort, whether it's intruding on a day at the beach and wedging itself into the most inconvenient crevices, or sticking to anything and everything placed in its vicinity. As someone once said, it's coarse, it's rough, and it gets everywhere. But if SCP-165 ever breaks containment and spreads to other parts of the country, or even the world, it could do much more harm than some simple irritation. That is, if it isn't already out there. The mites feed so quickly, so efficiently, it's possible they're dwelling in other sandy areas and just haven't been discovered yet. How many small desert towns have they picked to the bone? How many beachside communities have been decimated? I can't say for sure, but I can say this. Next time you take a trip to the shore and decide to feel the sand between your toes, make sure to look down from time to time, just to make sure your toes are still there. A perfect shot. The photographer holds up his camera, focusing on the deer. Then, the creature turns and stares down the photographer with the face of a human man. A long, elegant neck ending in a mutated abomination. The photographer drops the camera and runs away screaming. He won't be coming back to get it. He'd rather just buy a new one. A woman is walking her dog along the dirt road she's walked down every day for several years. It winds alongside a dense forest and past several large plots of land. Some are occupied by farms, some have been left abandoned. It's a pleasant walk, one she can always count on to be as quiet and peaceful as it is stimulating for her dog, with plenty to look at and smell. Occasionally he gets distracted by a wild animal, but the odd squirrel or possum is nothing the dog hasn't seen before, and she can quickly get him back on the path with a whistle and a tug of his leash. As the two of them near a familiar bend toward the halfway point of the walk, she can't help but notice that something seems off about the dog's behavior today. His steps are anxious, and his hackles are up. He keeps sniffing the air, tugging at the leash, whining insistently, as if trying to tell her something. She soothes the dog, promising him that there's nothing over there. The area he keeps staring at, a low growl rumbling in his chest, is an abandoned farm. No one's been over there for years, but no matter what she does, he keeps staring at that abandoned farm in the distance. Suddenly, there's a rustling sound, some sort of unseen animal moving through the bushes toward the farm. The noise sets the dog off, and he jolts in its direction, yanking so hard and so abruptly on the leash that it flies out of his owner's hand. Free to pursue whatever had been aggravating him so much, the dog tears off toward the abandoned farm. The woman chases after him, desperate to catch her beloved pet before he gets himself attacked by a wild animal, or worse. She sprints after the dog for half a mile until they've passed the ruins of an old barn and reached a horse paddock that seems to be in surprisingly good condition. As the woman catches her breath, she spots a sign she'd never noticed before on the road. It reads, "The Miracle Farm." The paint is unchipped, vivid, even fresh. This doesn't look abandoned. Her dog barks sharply, and she follows the sound. There he is, crouched low to the ground, shaking and barking at a pair of horses. Wait. No, those aren't horses. They have the hooves, the haunches, the tails, but their upper bodies are all human torso, arms, head, and face. It shouldn't be possible, but her dog is barking at what appears to be a pair of centaurs. She grabs hold of his leash, urging him back from the strange beasts. As she backs away, she hears a sound behind her, like a person imitating the crow of a rooster. She spins around and sees a wide-eyed man with a bright red wattle on his face, feathers jutting out of his neck. He crows again, then stoops to peck at the ground. Just behind the rooster man, she sees even more impossible human-animal hybrids. Rotund, pink-fleshed children with pig noses roll in a puddle of mud. A woman coiled up on a rock stares straight ahead, forked tongue flitting in and out of her mouth as she hisses. This place isn't abandoned after all. There is still a farm here, but it's no ordinary farm. The woman scoops her dog, her completely ordinary non-human dog, into her arms and sprints back toward the dirt road. She keeps going, running all the way home until she can get to a phone, and immediately calls the authorities. The first few people she speaks to laugh at her, accusing her of making a prank call, but one man takes her seriously and records her report. Then he passes it on to his friends at the SCP Foundation. They conduct a raid of the Miracle Farm and find that it is just as bizarre as the woman described. They uncover files in their office detailing that the property once belonged to Marshall, Carter & Dark Limited, before its ownership passed to a private company that specializes in the finest in custom-ordered pets, prey, and companions. Mobile Task Force Theta 2, Moreau's morgue, is deployed to the scene, where they bring all on-hand personnel, clients, and living specimens into custody. Personnel and clients are questioned, then given Class A amnestics and released. The specimens are contained for further study, and the facility is destroyed. But not before the MTF discovers a curious marble statue, acting as a fountainhead, providing all drinking water for the animal-human hybrids on site. The statue, depicting the Roman goddess Venus, allows water to flow out of its mouth when pumped in through the base. Somehow, water flowing through it is causing ordinary animals to transform into these bizarre creations. But how? The fountain is quickly removed from the area and brought to the Foundation for further study. And that is the story of how the SCP Foundation got its hands on SCP-1575. As is frequently the case at the SCP Foundation, the research team quickly began conducting controlled experiments using SCP-1575. They exposed a variety of animal test subjects to water that had passed through the fountainhead. I combed through the test logs I was able to access and have compiled some of the most relevant examples of the anomaly's effects on various subjects. I must warn you that some of the imagery contained within may be a bit disturbing, even by SCP Foundation standards. I admit that a few of them turned my significantly desensitized stomach, but still, they fascinate me, and like a train wreck in slow motion, I haven't been able to look away. Test 1575-2 was performed on a female Japanese field mouse, Apodemus argenteus, at the adolescent stage of development. After several weeks of exposure to SCP-1575-1, the mouse began to rapidly increase in size. Over the course of 12 days, the mouse grew to a height of 1.01 meters, a 500% increase in overall body size. As the mouse began to grow, her fur falling out and being replaced with smooth, human skin, her face warping into that of a young human woman, her appetite increased drastically. She was provided a standard field mouse diet of fruits, berries, and nuts, and consumed nearly 95% of her body weight at a given time in this provided food. By the 12th day of her mutation, the mouse's heart was unable to support her rapidly growing body, and it gave out. She died due to failure of her cardiovascular system, leaving behind an eerie half-mouse, half-human creature with a vestigial tail, partially transformed paws, and gray-tinged skin where her fur had once been. Test 1575-4's subject was a pre-adolescent male white-tailed deer, Otocoileus virginianus. The deer began to mutate fairly quickly following exposure to the water, and its initial steps were an alarming sight, to say the least. He began to suffer severe hemorrhaging in the pelvic area as his reproductive organs atrophied. By the end of the mutation cycle, they had disappeared entirely, leaving a smooth, fleshy surface behind. Several male researchers in attendance had to leave the room during the initial bleeding, and one asked to be referred to an on-site counselor regarding a persistent, recurring nightmare inspired by the mutation. The deer's arms and legs changed into human arms and legs, hooves into hands and feet. By the end of the process, which stabilized after 30 days, the deer had become an androgynous-looking Eastern Seaboard Native American person. The only remaining indicators that this had once been something other than human were a tail and antler nubs resembling those characteristic of yearling bucks. After testing the anomaly on prey animals, the researchers decided to explore its effects on a predator. The subject of test 1575-6 was an adult female Bengal tiger, Panthera tigris tigris. Naturally, there were concerns about the safety of researchers given the subject's aggressive nature. To prevent any accidental injury or death, she was kept sedated for the duration of any hands-on examination. Unfortunately, the application of these sedatives had a negative impact on the tiger's health during the mutation process. After 4 days, before any dramatic visible transformation had even taken place, the tiger experienced failure of the heart, liver, and kidneys. Though this experiment was largely regarded as a failure, it provided the team with a vital piece of information. Sedatives should not be used on test subjects until they were further along in their transformation and at least 80% stabilized. After the tiger, the research team pivoted to the least threatening version of a similar animal, an adolescent female domestic cat, Felis catus. The transformation occurred without incident over the course of 30 days. It was described as unsettling to watch, especially coupled with the pained yowls of the subject, which slowly transformed into the screams of a young woman. But the subject survived the process. Her body stretched and contorted, claws turned to long, pointed fingernails, whiskers fell out, and fur was completely shed. By the time her transformation was complete, there was a young woman in the containment chamber, crawling around on all fours and batting at particles of dust. She retained her tail, the aforementioned pointed nails, and eyes with the same vertical slit pupils she had as a feline. She spoke several times, but only to request additional food. After testing on a cat, the next natural step was to test the anomaly on a dog. For test 1575-9, the subject was an adult female domestic canine, Canis lupus familiaris, of mixed breed. At this point in time, it was believed that the fountainhead had no anomalous effect on invertebrates. Unfortunately, this experiment proved otherwise. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The dog was exposed to the anomalous water, and dramatic signs of mutation soon began to show. First, the dog began shedding all of its fur. At this point, the researchers got an unfortunate look at something that had been hiding in the dog's coat, an infestation of fleas, which were beginning to transform as well. The fleas had quadrupled in size and were continuing to grow. Even more horrifying, their legs had changed into appendages resembling human fingers, and their features rearranged into a nightmarish facsimile of a human face, blood pouring from their open mouths. Unfortunately for the test subject and any researchers present, the fleas were not the only parasite that had infested this dog. On the 6th day of the experiment, the slowly mutating dog collapsed on her side, breathing heavily, exhibiting intense discomfort. Her abdomen began to distend, and nearby researchers could see something wriggling just beneath the skin. The motion became more violent, and the abdomen distended further and further, as if the dog was progressing through the stages of pregnancy at an advanced rate. One of the researchers made an anxious comment about being reminded of a particular scene from the movie Alien and was admonished for it. But he was quickly proven right, because with a sudden burst, a tapeworm with the face of a man erupted through the skin, screaming at the top of its lungs, eyes rolling wildly in its sockets. One researcher vomited, another fainted. The experiment was swiftly aborted, and testing procedures were updated to include a specification that all subjects must be examined for parasites prior to any exposure to SCP-1575. None of the mutated creatures survived this test. The dog test was a colossal failure on many counts, but it inspired the research team to continue testing on non-mammals, not invertebrates, no one wanted to go down that road again, but other animals at least. For test 1575-12, the subject was a pre-adolescent female hyacinth macaw, Anodorhynchus hyacinthinus. The parrot swiftly began to change, and the sound of agonized caws filled the room, along with a sickening snapping sound. After a moment, the sound was identified as breaking bones. The rest of the bird's body, particularly the muscles and organs, were transforming at a faster pace than the skeleton. The body contorted painfully, and the wings began to split, forming into rudimentary fingers and hands. But the transformation never finished, never stabilized. After 20 days, the macaw was dead, and the cause of death was determined to be internal injuries due to these extensive bone fractures. The subject of test 1575-13 was an adult female leopard gecko, Eublepharis macularius. The transformation occurred at an accelerated rate, and within 1 week, the lizard had grown to a height of approximately 4 feet and displayed many human characteristics, including human legs and feet, a face, and a full head of hair. The hands remained unchanged, though they were larger, and the specimen was still capable of climbing up walls, much like an ordinary gecko. At the 10-day mark, the subject experienced catastrophic organ failure as a result of the mutation and expired. One more test on an invertebrate was conducted, this time deliberately. For test 1575-14, the subject was a female common green grasshopper, Homocestus viridulus. As the mutation began, the grasshopper began to shed its exoskeleton in a process best described as flesh forcing its way out of a casing, breaking the exoskeleton into pieces. What was left following this shedding process was a creature resembling the same grasshopper, but 3 times larger and covered in human skin. It continued to grow, but no further human features seemed to develop. After 15 days, it expired. An autopsy revealed the development of human organs inside, including a heart, lungs, kidneys, and liver. The cause of death could not be determined, but the transformation process is thought to have made the subject incompatible with life. The subject of test 1575-15 was an adult female grizzly bear, Ursus arctos horribilis. During the first 29 days of her mutation, the bear did not consume any food or drink aside from SCP-1575-1. Still, she did not appear to experience any hunger or discomfort aside from the pain of the transformation itself. Her body slowly shrank over the course of 30 days, her fur thinning until it left only the ordinary amount of body hair for an average human woman. Notably, the hair was the same color as the fur she had once had. She retained her bear paws, which appeared to be uncomfortably heavy at the ends of her new human arms. Throughout the transformation, stool samples taken from the subject showed excessive amounts of organic matter, such as blood and fatty deposits. After 32 days, the mutation was complete, and the former bear's condition was stable. She did not speak. Instead, she used her newly transformed mouth and voice to grunt and roar. It was much less intimidating coming out of her human mouth, but researchers noted that her paws and claws were still dangerous and should be avoided. The subject of test 1575-16 was an adolescent female Gravy's zebra, also imperial zebra, Equus grevii. Over the course of 27 days, the zebra's main body, hind legs, and most of her head mutated into a human, resembling the appearance of a person native to Africa. However, her front legs and jaw structure remained that of a zebra. The transformation stabilized, leaving her in this half-changed state. She was unable to move without pain, unable to eat, and exhibited extreme distress at her state of existence. When she attempted to walk, she would lose her balance and topple over, lying on the ground in agony. It is uncertain what caused the transformation to halt at such an incomplete stage, but the subject's quality of life had been all but destroyed. After a thorough physical examination, the half-transformed zebra specimen was euthanized as a humane measure. As disturbing as the results of the Foundation's tests using SCP-1575 were, they allowed for a more thorough understanding of the anomaly and how it operates. The statue, which was studied extensively, shows no anomalous properties on its own, nor do any samples taken of the marble throw up any red flags. It appeared to be a completely ordinary statue, except for the effect that it has on any water that flows through it. This water, or SCP-1575-1, begins to show its anomalous true colors when consumed by a non-human mammal. Non-human mammals who consume 0.5 or more liters of this water per day will begin to mutate over the course of a month. Perplexingly, impossibly, they will mutate into a human being. During the experiments, it was noted that the ethnicity of the resulting human seems to correspond with the humans native to the natural habitat of the pre-transformation mammal. A European deer displays Caucasian features, for example, while a North American deer resembles a Native American. Domestic dogs and cats have ethnically ambiguous features or appear mixed race, likely due to the mixed backgrounds of their species. Many of the survivors of this process develop vocal cords and are able to speak about their experiences, but their odds of surviving are not great. Female specimens have about a 25% fatality rate. Males have a staggering fatality rate of about 95%. There is a 40% chance that the transformed animal, regardless of sex, will keep at least one premutation feature. These include, but are not limited to, paws, tails, ears, and fur. Across the board, those who survive the mutation process describe it as extremely painful. Though these transformed animals can communicate, they tend to display an intelligence level that aligns with their prior species. There are a few exceptions to this, as some subjects have displayed heightened problem-solving skills, but it is uncertain what exactly caused this shift. Proposed causes include neural restructuring during mutation or an unintended byproduct of the Foundation testing itself. These transformed instances do not magically become human in behavior, personality, or habits. They retain their animal instincts, memories, and sense of self, give or take some added depression or anxiety brought on by the traumatic and drastic changes they've endured. Humans exposed to this anomalous water do not seem to change at all, which makes a degree of sense. If the water serves to transform mammals into human beings, then a human drinking it has nothing for the water to change. Still, I wouldn't suggest drinking it. Tap water may not taste great, but it's far less likely to mutate you. SCP-1575 is currently held in a 6 meter by 6 meter by 4 meter containment chamber at Biosite 23, with direct access to Research Laboratory 3 at the same site. Unless it is actively in use for an approved test, no water may be allowed into SCP-1575's containment. After testing has concluded, all water used during the test is to be held in quarantine and may only be used for further tests. At the time of my reading, I discovered one addendum added to the file for SCP-1575 by a doctor assigned to the anomaly. It reads, "Following the incident on the 12th of this month, during test 1575-9, any animal to be used in testing with SCP-1575 is to be thoroughly examined for both external and internal parasites. Our initial beliefs that SCP-1575-1 only affected the primary host has proven wrong. It apparently retains its mutagenic properties, even when ingested secondarily through the host's lower GI tract or bloodstream. We absolutely do not need another instance of half-mutated flea creatures, and the psychologist is having a hard time helping Janet with her nightmares of a 7-foot-long tapeworm with a screaming face tearing out of the belly of a dog. I fear that Janet and I may have those nightmares in common. This imagery will stay with me for quite some time. When it comes to drinking water from mysterious fountains, proceed with caution, my friends. Sure, this particular fountainhead may not trigger mutation in humans, but that doesn't mean it's the only one of its kind out there. Drink from the wrong water spout, and you may find yourself changed, and no one, including me, can predict what you might become." Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-5019, Loopy Lily.